across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, good afternoon. Welcome to the home of common sense. Thank you to Julia. She's back tomorrow, of course, at 10 o'clock as the Epstein files continue to spill out scandals. Peter Mandelson accused by the Prime Minister of lying to him about his relationship with the American billionaire, and with the police set to investigate Mandelson over misconduct. How many more scandals will the establishment see? Is the British establishment inherently corrupt? Let me just put the question like that. Connected to this, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has moved out of his royal lodge, poor lamb, amid the fallout over his links to the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. The former Duke of York has relocated to Wood Farm Cottage. I'm sure that's bigger than my house. Part of the King Sandringham estate, while he waits for renovations to his new home, Marsh Farm, which I'm sure is also bigger than my house. What a tired, tragic life he leads. And the Welsh First Minister has blamed Netflix for the closure of pubs, insisting that people need to get out into the local area more if they want to save and support businesses. We'll look at that in just a bit as well. Loads to get through at this end. Ways to get in touch, very simple, 0344 499 1000. And of course you can message 87222. So here's the question then. Do we have an establishment problem, and is the British establishment corrupt? Here's a little reminder. I want you to have a careful listen to some of this. This is the stuff that's been going on over the last few years. Here it is.
I wish I'd had the opportunity to remind him of the circumstances of my relationship, my friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, and how I came to write the emails in the first place.
Hospitals have rules with patients and things like that. Well, because I'm dyslexic when I want to be. I don't understand rules.
Rotherham, October 2011. 21 laptops containing grooming gang records mysteriously vanish from the Children's Services headquarters.
Because he was with such status with who he was, a BBC presenter, he had such power. I feel like I had to listen to him because he was Hugh Edwards.
Good morning and welcome. More awful stories of MPs' expenses dodges today.
It was wrong, quite profoundly wrong, that the police changed the records of what happened and tried to blame the fans.
The BBC understands there will be no charges in the Cash for Honours inquiry.
This man has done more to divide this nation than anybody else. He's looked after his own pocket. I still refer to him as Dodgy Dave.
Peter Mandelson, Jimmy Savile, grooming gangs, Hugh Edwards, MP's expenses, Hillsborough, Cash for Honours. That's just a selection. This is in our lifetimes. This is very recent stuff, right up to the present day. Let me throw the question out to you like that. Is the British establishment corrupt? And here's the thing. The more you think about this, the worse it gets. There's no exaggeration or mischievous hyperbole going on here when it comes to the stories, in this case, of Prince Andrew and Peter Mandelson. You could even throw in Sarah Ferguson for good measure, although she's merely providing some vaguely humorous, albeit the darkest possible, respite to this grim, depraved, criminal and disturbing story. To coin the phrase, if you wrote it in a book, nobody would ever believe you. But now we're dealing with layer upon layer of horrific or just plain jaw-dropping accusations. I should say at this stage, all parties deny any wrongdoing. Have we ever seen anything like this? The former Deputy Prime Minister, also the business secretary at the time, leaking information, market-sensitive information to a rich bloke because he wants to impress him. As we heard yesterday, the police confirmed, the Met Police on Tuesday night, they had launched an investigation into how they described a 72-year-old man, a former government minister, for misconduct in a public office, an offence that potentially carries a life sentence. I should say, by the way, because I went down a bit of a rabbit hole on this one, the first person to ever find themselves in jail for misconduct in a public office was a man called Charles Bembridge, who was sentenced to jail in 1783. He was an accountant, this fella, and he was working with the Paymaster General. He was accused of corruptly concealing the fact that several large sums of money had been omitted from the final accounts. He went to jail for 6 months. But here's the thing. He got fined. Remember, this was 1783. He was fined £2,650. And for number crunching fans out there, that's the equivalent of being fined £518,629 today. I mean, that's massive. I don't know how he survived that back in 1783, but that's how serious it can get, of course. Thames Valley Police, meanwhile, say they are assessing allegations reported by many news outlets that a second woman was sent to the UK by Jeffrey Epstein for a sexual encounter with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. The encounter allegedly occurred at the former prince's residence, Royal Lodge, in 2010. The woman, who's not British, was in her 20s at the time. Her lawyer, Brad Edwards, had previously said, we're talking about at least one woman who was sent by Jeffrey Epstein over to Prince Andrew. He was asked for comment. He's given none, but his only response is that he denies any wrongdoing. In a statement, Thames Valley Police said it was aware of reports about a woman said to have been taken to an address in Windsor in 2010 for sexual purposes. They say we're assessing information in line with our established procedures. So you have a man who was X amount in line to the throne, who could conceivably have been our monarch, who's alleged, I have to keep using that word, to have had girls flown around the world for his sexual pleasure as supplied by Jeffrey Epstein. We have a former business secretary. The long list. I mean, if you want to go to the US Department of Justice website and check out the Epstein latest drop, as they rather annoyingly call it, and just Control F, put Mandelson in, and believe me, there are so many entries involving Peter Mandelson. And of course, the problem is that it's not just a case of a fella that he once knew. It's a case that a fella he remained in contact with after he'd been in prison for awful accusations, sexual accusations, and procuring of prostitution of a minor, etc. It was after that. And the information was relevant, according to these files. Mr. Mandelson, again, will deny any wrongdoing on this. The Prime Minister today at PMQ's said, no, nothing to do with us. We had reassurances. Did you not have a little more to go on, Mr. Starmer? 0344 499 1000 is where you'll find us. All of that, but the central question, is the British establishment corrupt, or do we have, when you're running this thing called life and you've got bureaucracies and governments and departments and establishments, you've got the police, you've got health, education, the BBC, when you've got something that big, and that's just in our small isle, are you always just going to get an amount of wrong-uns? Is it just that? 0344 499 1000, or what are we inherently, do we have an inherent problem with the establishment? Is the British establishment, is it corrupt? 0344 499 1000. We'll take some calls on that. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Kezia Noble joins us, author and host of the UK Now political current affairs programme, which is doing rather well, Kezia. I noticed online you're up there all the time, big presence, and it seems to be growing as well. And welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on.
It's a pleasure. Tell us a little bit about your own current affairs programme, how you tackle these kind of issues, what you get into, and what is currently floating the boats of the kind of panellists that you have on.
Also, I always make sure that my panel is not an echo chamber, so I'll always invite somebody on to give the counter argument. I think that's very healthy. And we talk about a wide range of subjects. Mm-hmm. We talk about Israel-Gaza. We had a very fiery one on that recently. Yep. We talk about net zero. We talk about men's mental health. We talk about bringing up children. So it's a wide range of conversations.
That's good to hear, because we can't have enough of that, frankly, at the moment. And, you know, the news agenda, as you know, Kezia, just keeps on giving. And this Mandelson story, I mean, the more I think about it, I think this could be up there as one of the greatest scandals of our times.
So as someone who's stepping into the political world myself, this makes me so angry. You see, the problem that we have is that there are too many politicians who are greedy, and they put their own personal ambition, their own personal gain before their role as an elected MP. And, you know, think about it, it's such a great opportunity to use that power, you know, to be a force for good, to make a positive impact on this country. It's such a great opportunity that you've been given. And to use that, to abuse that power just for self-interest. Now, the thing is, in the political world, greed will lead to you becoming compromised. It is inevitable.
Yeah.
And you will have to pay the piper at some point. And it really, with Mandelson, it's even more peculiar because he is a wealthy man. He has a lot of money.
Yeah.
And the amount of money that he made from these deals, it was a lot by an average person's measure, but it wasn't like, you know, billions or hundreds and hundreds of millions. So he's risked everything. He's risked everything. More importantly, he's risked that opportunity to do something positive for this country and for its people, for, again, personal gain. And this is the big problem. So how widespread is it? Well, let's look at Keir Starmer and this Chinese embassy. You know, it doesn't make sense. The math isn't mathing, right? It doesn't make sense. Why does he want to have that right bang in the middle of London? A lot of people are worried about it. Is he compromised? We don't know.
Yeah.
How widespread is this? But it's enough. I think there's a lot of politicians who are not greedy, and even if we don't agree with, you know, their policies, they're doing it because they think it's for the greater good for the country.
Indeed. And when you look at if you put it together, I mean, the big two stories, of course, are Prince Andrew and Mandelson. But we played a little clip at the beginning, I don't know if you caught it, that looked at some of the other areas of the, if you like, the British establishment. Jimmy Savile, grooming gangs, Hugh Edwards, MP's expenses, Hillsborough, cash for honours, all of these things. And that question is it the British establishment that is corrupt, or do we just have certain individuals at certain times that go a bit rogue?
I would say that it's worse than it was, let's say, 40 years ago. There's always been a level of, you know, corruption within governments. But I think that now it's so widespread that it is affecting the country. It's affecting the country's safety, and it's affecting us, the people. It's widespread enough.
Sure.
I think there's a lot of people who are paying the piper right now. They're compromised, and it's coming out. Because eventually that's what happens. If you're putting greed first, if you're doing deals for your own personal gain, it's going to catch up with you. And I'm glad this is all being exposed now.
Absolutely. We spoke to a Labour peer yesterday, and she said, while she was happy to be on the show, she said, you probably really need to speak to a psychologist rather than a politician on this. And I thought she had a point, really, because if you think someone like Mandelson, the whole skill set that this bloke had was that he knew where all the bear traps were. This was a guy that specialised in not falling into those chasms. He knew how to avoid the issues that could cause problems to MPs. He knew the bad uns. He could spot them a mile off. So he had this antenna that was razor sharp. It was like no other. And yet he still fell there himself. And the fall that he's going to have, well, he's already had a few falls, but this one is likely to be completely irredeemable. How does somebody who has that, all of that on their CV, end up being at the centre of a downfall themselves?
Because, and it is to do with psychology, greed eclipses everything. When you get that taste for money, when you are no longer happy with what you have, and you have to have more. And this also can be sexually also, because you have to remember this list is full of greedy people and perverts, okay? So perversion is the same thing. Like greed, it overtakes, it eclipses logic, rationality. So you can get the most rational person, they get a taste for money, they get caught in that greed downward spiral. And that's when they start making bad decisions. They don't think about it. They don't realise that they're compromised even.
I think that's right. And he was, I think with Mandelson, he was so high on the adrenaline that he felt he was in this top tier of billionaires because of this Epstein guy, that he felt, yeah, there was a certain protection. And despite the fact that you could say, you know, when you look back at some of these emails and the way they're written and the very careful way that oddly Epstein doesn't reveal an awful lot about himself and his own sexual preferences. We know what they now are, but they weren't revealed in the emails as such. But he got others to sort of open up and talk about things. So he kind of sat back and chewed the fat, took in the information. And Mandelson was there like a little puppy dog. Hours before the Prime Minister was about to resign back in 2010, sending that information to an outside source, a man in another country, because he wanted to impress him.
Yeah, you could say that this is incompetence, you could say it's stupidity, but I think it still comes down to the fact that he was governed by greed.
Correct. Yeah, it was greed, and the greed being power more than anything else.
It's like I said, I'm so angry about this, because to become a politician, you have that opportunity to make a positive impact in this country. It's such a privilege. It's such a privilege to have that position, and the way that he abused it, like so many of them. Like I get more angry with these people than the people who have policies which I'm not in favor of, but they genuinely believe that it will be better for the country.
Oh, completely, completely. There's nothing wrong with disagreement. We live in a democracy. I think it's fantastic. People often say about, you know, the Green Party or whatever. It's like, no, I'm glad the Green Party are there. That's part of our democracy. We're meant to have people with different views. They might be bonkers, but great that they exist. You know, it's a choice. It's a spectrum. But these people, Mandelson, Mountbatten Windsor, or whatever the hell he's called this week, these are the horror stories of our cast of characters in the human condition.
Yes, it's personal gain. As I said, it's down to personal gain. And they're so caught up, and it's all unravelling now. It's all unravelling before everyone's eyes.
Indeed. Kezia, stay with us. We're going to have more stories. We've got a cracking story coming out of Wales from the First Minister there, all about Netflix. Find out a little more about that. Kezia Noble with us, looking at those stories. Your comments are on the way, 0344 499 1000. I do think the Mandelson thing, I mean, the Prince Andrew thing, or the former Prince Andrew thing, is just jaw-droppingly disturbing for all the obvious reasons. But the Mandelson thing is all part of the same, under the same umbrella of Epstein. But I'm looking at, the more I look at this, I think that this is almost one of the worst we've ever seen. And somebody mentioned Profumo yesterday. It's like, no, it goes way beyond Profumo. Famous case from the 60s, I guess? 0344 499 1000. You can drop us a voice note there as well. You can message 87222.
there is definitely some credence to be given to the idea of guilt by association, and mere association or mere presence doesn't indicate guilt or doesn't indicate that you actually participated in these sordid and disgusting crimes. But when you see the repetitiousness, when you see the long-term interactions where it would be very difficult for anybody to be friends with Jeffrey Epstein without knowing the reputation, without seeing the assorted detritus in his path that he's left.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
We are looking at the stories of the day, and of course, it's only helped along by your comments. 0344 499 1000. Rupert Bell's going to join us in a bit as well, talk about the former Prince Andrew bloke, Isabel Oakeshott as well, on that question. Is the British establishment inherently corrupt? Your thoughts on that? Lines are open. We have Kezia Noble with us discussing the big stories of the day. Interesting one this, Kezia. First Minister of Wales has been criticised for claiming the public need to stop watching Netflix if they want to save British pubs. Let's have a listen to what she had to say.
And if people want to see those businesses succeed, they need to use them. They need to stop buying things online. They need to get out of their homes and stop watching Netflix. They need to stop buying that bottle of wine at home and go out to the pub.
Well, I'm quite a fan, Kezia, of a bottle of wine and a bit of Netflix. But has she got a point? Are we wrecking the Great British Pub because we can't be bothered to go out?
Yeah, she has a point. She has a point. We have to do our bit, obviously. Like, we've become very insular as people. You know, we have all this entertainment in our houses now. Like when I was growing up, you got bored and you didn't want to be in the house. You know, you had 5 channels to pick from and that was it. No Deliveroo or anything like that. That was like a very special treat to have a takeaway. So it forced you to go out and be sociable. But now we can sit at home. We can go from one screen to another. We can be WhatsApping our friends. We can be looking at social media, watching Netflix, buying a cheap bottle of wine, getting a cheap takeout. So we do have to be more mindful and try and make an effort to step out of that. I know it's hard, but I like, for instance, do digital detoxes now and again. And it just forces you to go out and talk to people and, make that human face-to-face contact. But what she's not addressing is everything that is going against these pubs from the government itself and from local councils. She's not addressing that. So, for instance, obviously business rates, the tax on alcohol, the increase in the minimum wage. So it's harder for them to get staff, like young people, to work in the pubs like they used to as part-time jobs. Also, they've become a lot more strict, I believe, on how much alcohol you can consume before you step into a car, before you drive. So that makes it more difficult. So there's a lot of people who are saying like they live they live quite rural. Yeah. And then they'll go to a pub for 1 pint because they're allowed to have that. That's their special thing. And they'll have that pint and it will last for maybe an hour and they get to speak to people and they keep to the rules, then they can drive. But now they are, I think it's half a pint, I believe. And they just said, look, people are not going to come in all that way just for half a pint. So it's things like this. Also, there's to do with so many pubs closing down. There's so many pubs closing down. So she's got one part right. We have to do our bit. But if it's so expensive to go to the pub, if there's not many pubs there anyway to choose from, it's just, we're going to end up being at home a lot more. Yeah. Absolutely. And it just ties in with something while you're with us, Kezia, because dating is your area of expertise, of course. It's an interesting combination of careers you've got here. You've got the dating thing and a fast-growing political and current affairs programme at the same time. There's probably a bit of a crossover there as well. But lots of people now, a date night could be, not going to a restaurant, not going to a pub. It's Netflix and wine and often something else. So Netflix, again, responsible for that too. Yeah, Netflix and chill, as they say. Yeah. Okay, so first of all, I don't do the dating stuff so much right now. But I do feel that people are actually still going out on dates. They don't want to go directly to somebody's house. It might be convenient for one of them, but the other one is still unsure, and they will go to usually a bar rather than a pub. So it's not as simple.
But it's interesting though that if you consider the same issue around, we mentioned Deliveroo and Netflix and Amazon and Just Eats and all of those. I mean, the same thing's happened with dating, hasn't it? Because you just go to, Hinge or Tinder or some of the dodgy ones Finn, our producer, goes to. I mean, you just have to, you swipe in the right direction and away you go. Happy days or not.
I encourage all my clients never to go near dating apps. You should only go on dating apps if you're like 75 plus or you're living in a mountain somewhere. Okay, that's what it was originally for. Remember internet dating? That was for like the lonely hearts.
Yeah.
People made fun of those people and it's become normalized. Now, dating apps back in 2010 were sort of meant to be the silver bullet, and they were quite good. But now, ask anyone. The dating apps are full of weirdos, broken people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, am I allowed to say this? Prostitutes? Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, there's a lot of girls on there just looking for an ego boost, looking for extra people to go follow them on their Instagram.
Yep. You've just given all the reasons why Finn, our producer, loves them, you see. So it kind of works in that. Do you remember when they used to just be columns in the back of local newspapers saying, would like to meet a 35-year-old, clean-shaven, whatever, those days are long gone, of course. Let's just finally move on to this one, Kezia. This is another interesting story. Trans athletes who were born male have no advantage over women. This is a British Medical Journal study. No idea where they got this from. Let's have a reminder, of course, of the 2 American women who refused to stand on a podium at a track meeting with a trans woman. Here it is.
There are so many girls who deserve this award for their courage. Girls like my friends Sophia and Maddie, who took a stand with me at that first track meet back in Oregon. And to all the girls who are currently fighting for fairness, just know nothing will happen if you do nothing. We need to fight to protect the future of women's sports and to be strong and courageous.
I've no idea what they've been putting in the Kool-Aid over there at the British Medical Journal, Kezia. It seems bonkers to me that someone who demonstrably is born male and therefore anatomically, biologically and all the rest of it clearly has a strength advantage, obviously, which manifests in sport, that there would be no advantage to that.
And it's from a young age also. And I'm so glad that I lived before this. Like, I was younger before this all came out. I used to be an athlete. I used to be a sprinter, 100 meter. If I had one guy who was my age or a bit older than me, I would not have accomplished what I did. And just another personal anecdote, if I may. For instance, I see it with my 10-year-old son. So he plays football and he's crazy about football. But now they've said they've got to have a minimum of 3 girls in the team. Now, these 3 girls are really good at football and good on them for getting involved, but they can't handle it. They come off the pitch crying because the boys are aggressive. The boys play differently. Okay, they're not breaking rules. They just play differently. And the little girls can't handle it. They think they can, but they can't. And again, I'm not trying to put girls down here. I think it's great that they're playing football, but they need to play with other girls. Okay, they can't be playing with boys because I've seen the results with my own eyes. And yeah, I don't understand, why can't men and women just play, like, I don't know, snooker or darts amongst each other if they want to look for a competitive sport? Yeah. Why does it have to always be wrestling and, fighting? That's a very interesting one. Why do so many of these trans people go into fighting and, boxing?
Yeah, they are the more kind of strengthy ones. But, yeah. I don't know, is it back to the dating thing, Kezia, is that the ideal date for you, a night at the snooker hall?
I don't mind a bit of, you know what is quite good? You can have a drink, you can have a talk, a chat at the same time. Yeah. It's actually a really good one. I like that.
Go for a 147. Listen, Kezia, great to have you on with us. Thank you, as ever, to Kezia Noble. We will speak again. Author and host of the UK Now Political and Current Affairs podcast programme. You can check that out online as well. Over to you, 0344 499 1000. Is the British establishment corrupt? We'll have some calls on that shortly as well. Rupert Bell joins us to talk about the former royal that is Andrew, and Isabel Oakeshott on that wider question about the British establishment. Lines are open. It's 1:30. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. This from Cliff in Berkshire. I would suggest, Ian, that what is wrong with our government, our parliament and our establishment is too many lawyers therein. It could just be that. It could just be that. Pumpkin says, I'll take my hat off to that lady. At least she's speaking the truth and saying the right words that we all want to hear. I assume he's referring to Kezia, our first guest. Let's move on. Lots of elements of this question about the establishment, of course, none more so than the former Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. He skulked off to the Royal Lodge under the cover of darkness to start his exile, all whilst Mandelson is facing legal threats. How much cover-up is going on with the establishment? Well, let's talk particularly on Andrew. We'll talk to Isabel Oakeshott shortly. Rupert Bell is with us, Talk's royal correspondent. It's interesting, Rupert, it seems only like 5 minutes ago when you and I were talking, we were asking the question, can Prince Andrew survive? That's long gone now. That ship has well and truly sailed multiple times, and he may have been stripped of his title. He may no longer have quite the home he used to have, although I'm pretty sure the new one's a bit tasty too. But it still gets worse for him.
Yes, and all these revelations just end up we get resigned almost to it. Here we go again. What is that? What is it being alleged? I mean, it just beggars belief, some of the latest allegations coming out from the release of this latest tranche of Epstein files. And you almost feel that we saw pictures of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor in Windsor Great Park on Monday, sort of looking as if it was business as usual, waving at passers-by as he drove, and he was riding his horse. And you almost get the feeling that perhaps the king has said, get out, we do not need to see photographs of you looking as if you haven't got a care in the world, and get up to Norfolk. It's as simple as that. And I think really they're exasperated, even to the extent that you've got Prince Edward, when asked when he's in the UAE, he said, we've got to think of the victims of this. So he was slightly, you almost feel, hanging Andrew out to dry here. I think the royal family are at their wits' end. Yeah. They knew why he was stripped of his title, that was more going to come out, and they sort of tried to grab the situation. But actually, it just seems to be getting worse, not only for him, but for his ex-wife as well.
Well, indeed, I mean, his ex-wife, I mean, I said earlier, if it wasn't connected to this horrendous creature called Epstein, it would just be funny. I mean, she looked any way she could make a swift quid. She was there, wasn't she, with the begging bowl? Didn't matter. She would do anything, for a bit of extra. Oh, Jeffrey, the older brother I never had. I want to marry you. And I know she was sort of joking or whatever, but it was just all a bit weird. On the Andrew stuff, some have said, look, this has been the royals for centuries. They bed hop, they play around, they do this, and it might not have been in an era previously when we had social media or 24-hour news channels. What Andrew's doing is nothing new.
Well, okay, I suppose you might be thinking Edward VII, back in the Victorian era. I mean, how many children did he possibly sire? He was, it was the royal family, and sort of aristocracy and royal families having affairs seemed to be de rigueur. But I think it's the unseemly nature of this and around Jeffrey Epstein that has put this in a new level. Of course, it was all hushed up back in the day. There wasn't the social media, there wasn't the prying, there was a sort of deference. Well, those days are long gone, and Andrews, by his arrogance, has causing a lot of anguish, I'm sure, for his elder brother and other members of the royal family, wondering, how could he behave like this? Why did he think this was a good thing? And then when you think back to that Newsnight interview, that just seems to have been an hour, if you believe the latest allegations, of complete and utter hogwash. Yeah. Because everything seems to be going, everything seems to be new. It's sort of uncharted territory. Not only what he's doing, they both look needy in their way they're sort of clawing and clutching at Jeffrey Epstein's friendship. Yeah. I mean, he was a devious arch manipulator, if you believe everything, and Andrew and Sarah Ferguson absolutely fell for it, hook, line and sinker.
Indeed. Just a final question on this. Is he likely to, as J.D. Vance has said, nip over to the States and give some kind of evidence on this? I think I know the answer, Rupert, but what do you say?
I say no, but I wonder whether the Metropolitan Police might want to be looking at something happened here. But let's remember, Andrew has denied absolutely everything that's been thrown at him.
Yeah.
But then the big question is, why did he give Virginia Giuffre $12 million if he was that innocent person?
That will always be the hanging question, of course. Rupert, thank you as ever. Rupert Bell Talks royal correspondent. We're talking about the British establishment. Is it inherently corrupt? Is it just a handful of individuals through the generations that throw up these curious, sometimes jaw-dropping, often horrific, as we've seen with this? Or is it something bigger than just individuals? Does it weave its way through all of our systems? Let's have a reminder of some of our not-so-great moments over the years.
I wish I'd had the opportunity to remind him of the circumstances of my relationship, my friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, and how I came to write the emails in the first place.
Hospitals have rules with patients and things like that. Well, because I'm dyslexic when I want to be. I don't understand rules.
Rotherham, October 2011. 21 laptops containing grooming gang records mysteriously vanish from the Children's Services headquarters.
Because he was with such factors, with who he was, a BBC presenter, he had such power. I feel like I had to listen to him because he was Hugh Edwards.
Good morning and welcome. More awful stories of MPs' expenses dodges today.
It was wrong, quite profoundly wrong, that the police changed the records of what happened and tried to blame the fans.
The BBC understands there will be no charges in the Cash for Honours inquiry.
This man has done more to divide this nation than anybody else. He's looked after his own pocket. I still refer to him as Dodgy Dave.
Still miss Dennis Skinner a little bit. You heard there, Mandelson, Savile, grooming gangs, Hugh Edwards, MP's expenses, Hillsborough, Cash for Honours. Let's speak with Isabel Oakeshott, Talks International editor. You've been around the journalistic block for a few years now. Isabel, I say that kindly, of course. And of course, these stories come and go. They are big. This current one, I think, seems to be, perhaps in many respects, in political terms, one of the biggest we've seen for many, many years, if not decades.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I felt quite old looking at that loop of scandals, because I do remember, in particular, I was a fairly, all things being relative, young reporter on that Cash for Honours scandal, which engulfed the Blair Brown government in, I think it was about sort of 2000 and, I don't know, 7 or 8 or 9, something like that. And, with each of these scandals, you think, can there be a bigger one? And then another one just comes along. And I think the question you're asking is there something wrong with us as a country, that we have these sort of enormous blow-ups like this? And actually, I'm going to be a bit counterintuitive and say that in many ways, it's something right about our country that we keep exposing what are generally, yes, they're awful stories, but they are not the level of endemic corruption that you see in many other countries. I mean, look at the money that sloshes around American politics, the money that senators are able to make on the back of their rolls. Our MPs, our parliamentarians, can't make an extra few quid without there being some kind of, ministerial questions about their integrity and standards of inquiries and so on. And that's a good thing. We are very, very, we're very rigid in our application of rules about propriety in public office in the UK. If you look at global rankings, just with my international editor hat on, the UK still ranks really well in terms of its global reputation for integrity, for lack of bribery. I mean, it's not a thing, is it, in the UK? Not one that we're aware of, that people who want things can just pay massive backhanders to get them, whereas that is absolutely integral to the political culture of even some
EU member states.
True.
You know, we're not necessarily talking parts of Africa, just parts of Africa. It's also certain EU member states. So I don't think we do too badly, but, and it's a big but, there is this establishment, and I never quite knew what that meant really, but I think when you look at something like Davos, you sort of see the establishment on the global elite on parade, and all the characters that have been drawn into this absolute Epstein catastrophe are the type of people that would also gather at that meeting of the World Economic Forum every year and various other annual shindigs. And these are global elites who, by virtue of their position and wealth, tend to know each other, or if they don't know each other directly, it's only one phone call away to get to know to reach the other person. And they look after each other. And I'm not sure whether that should be of a surprise to anybody, but when we see it in full kind of technicolor and we see how it can corrupt processes, that's when voters think, well, hang on a minute here, I'm just trying to earn a crust. Yeah. You guys are lording it around, having your emails about your parties, and meanwhile you're sort of deciding whether you're going to tax us at 35% or 50%, and you guys are just having a good time here, looking out for each other.
I think what's interesting about the Mandelson one, and he's been around. You will have met him several times through your work as a political journalist. I bumped into him a few times. I remember going to one of those press gallery lunch things where somebody comes in. You were possibly even there, Isabel, at the time. Mandelson was the guest speaker, and he's obviously very good at that kind of stuff. He's commanding. He's very funny, quite a mesmeric character. But of course, his whole shtick was that, he knew how to operate. That was the point. But the one thing he didn't know how to operate was himself, as it turns out, because what he was doing, it seems, wasn't really about personal gain in the conventional sense. He was hooked and high on power. And the Epstein thing, it seems to me, he thought he'd hit the jackpot by being mates with this guy. This guy was above governments. This guy was in the next stratosphere of power and influence, and Mandelson was part of his inner circle, or so he thought. And that's curious, because that's really about ego, not necessarily about specific greed or money.
Well, it's also about good times, isn't it? Those guys, in their own sordid way, a way of which the rest of us feel utterly repulsed, were having a really good time in their fancy properties with their beautiful people and their unseemly, sordid and in fact illegal ways. They were having a great laugh, weren't they? We see that in the emails, come on over for a party. Yeah. And you say that Mandelson wasn't doing it to feather his own nest. Well, I'm actually not so sure about that.
Well, no, I think he was, but in a kind of different sort of way from some of the examples we've been talking about. Yeah,
I think there's a lot of money involved here at various steps of the way. I mean, Peter Mandelson has been either at the front line of public life or operating in these circles at the highest level for 2 decades. And on the way through, he has got stupendously rich. Now, he's not a billionaire. I don't know how much he's worth. But how was all that money accrued? I'm not meaning to say that he's broken the law in the way that money was accrued, but I think access to the super rich, that intersection of super wealth and politics, gives you an awful lot of possibilities to make an awful lot of money.
Yeah, spot on. Isabel, great to have you on with us. Good to see you as well. Thank you. Isabel Oakeshott, Talks international editor. Dan in Kent says, we all know politicians like throwing each other under the bus, but Labour have literally put Mandy up against the wall and shot him. Fair play, can't argue. On the question of Starmer's judgment, I think 15 U-turns in 18 months rather answers that. It's a fair point, Dan. Yeah, it will always come down. I don't think we'll ever know, by the way, what did Starmer know. He was told we were given assurances. Maybe he was. Did the security services have any kind of inkling about... I mean, bearing in mind the last lot of emails only came out, last weekend. So I'm not going to blame Starmer for not knowing about that. But was he aware at all that Mandelson had kept a friendship up with a guy after he'd been to jail and even stayed at his house while he was in jail? You knew nothing about that? Nothing at all? I mean, if you didn't know anything at all, OK, Keir, sorry to bother you, mate. I'm struggling with that, are you? 0344 499 1000. That's where we are. Voice notes and calls on that number, 87222, if you're dropping us a message. 10 to 2 now. This is Talk.
There is definitely some credence to be given to the idea of guilt by association, and mere association or mere presence doesn't indicate guilt or doesn't indicate that you actually participated in these sordid and disgusting crimes. But when you see the repetitiousness, when you see the long-term interactions where it would be very difficult for anybody to be friends with Jeffrey Epstein without knowing the reputation, without seeing the assorted detritus in his path that he's left.
Jeremy Clarkson.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Terrible stuff. Just gone 10 to 2. Rich says there's loads of buried scandals with royals and the ruling classes, all of the alleged scandals with boys' homes in Belfast, all the schools and church scandals, all the police scandals. Yeah, we didn't even touch on the church scandals, did we? Religious scandals. You know, a really interesting area because, of course, they compromise not just the credibility of the establishment, but God. It brings all of that into it as well, the old ecclesiastical card. Carl's in Liverpool. What do you got for us, Carl? Afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think it's nice to see the house come crumbling down around these people, because for too long they've been thinking they're untouchable. No one knows anything about them, what they're doing, type of thing. And you know, in the age we live in with modern technology and people being I mean, it all started, didn't it, really, with Andrew, and it's just snowballed. And I think what needs to happen is these people need to be arrested if they've done things wrong. You know, it goes way higher than just Jeffrey Epstein and Mandelson and all these. There's so many more people involved, and I think it's just nice that for normal working people like myself to see these elites and everything around them come crumbling down because of their greediness, their ineffectiveness to be a good person, have a moral compass, because money and power has made these people evil.
The trouble is with so many of them in this respect, Carl, is that I don't think they think, and if you're sleeping with, you know, people that you shouldn't be, in the case of Epstein and what he was up to, I mean, that speaks for itself. But if you are Mandelson, for example, who's not, as far as I know, accused of that side of this discussion, he would probably not think at the time he was doing anything wrong. I mean, there he was on the eve of an election when his boss was about to lose the job as Prime Minister, walking around the corridors of Downing Street, texting Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, really? But I think he wouldn't have thought he was one of the bad guys. He thinks he's one of the good guys.
Yeah.
Which is worrying in itself.
It is. Well, if you look, you could apply the same to Andrew, Ian, because obviously this guy has done something wrong, and he continues to say that he hasn't.
Yeah.
The whole thing's dark and dirty, isn't it? And it goes a lot further and deeper than what we know right now. There's a lot more to come out, but I'm made up. I've got my popcorn, and I'm waiting for it all to kick off. And for these people need a rude awakening, Ian, because, like I said, for too long these elites, these people that are in power, in positions of power and privilege, they've ruled over us, and they look down at the common man and woman as if we're nothing, and now their whole house is burning down around them.
And I think particularly somebody like Prince Andrew, I'm not a massive fan of the idea of royalty, to be honest, Carl. The Queen did very dignified work as head of state, but the whole idea of it is a bit weird. Nobody would vote for a royal family tomorrow. However, within it, you've obviously got some, fairly decent, hard-working people, Princess Anne and the like, and then you get somebody like Prince Andrew, who's just lived this privileged life. He's had women throw themselves at him since he was, a teenager. That's how he's lived, and he's barked at servants and those below him, and he knows no other existence. And now to see their comeuppance, you're absolutely right. There is a certain sense of, about time too, mate, because we don't live in that sort of era anymore. Carl, great call. Thank you very much indeed for that. That's on Prince Andrew. What about Mandelson and all the rest of it? Robert's in Hertfordshire. Is this the worst scandal of our times, Robert, do you think?
Well, I'll tell you what's going to happen. We had a pound bet, a bottle of beer bet over. I said, well, Keir Starmer wouldn't last. I think it was summer. He won't be prosecuted, and I'll tell you for what. I guarantee you he will not be prosecuted because he knows where the bodies are buried. Simple as that. He knows where the bodies are buried.
Do you think so? So do you think that it would go into that kind of almost Netflix psychodrama territory where if the police thought, right, we've got a case against this guy, it would quietly be dropped?
Well, I'll guarantee you he won't end up behind bars. Let me give you a few examples. Hugh Edwards, the perpetrators of Baby P, Jimmy Savile, I can go on, and I've never known one instance where anybody's ever ended up behind bars.
Well, the perpetrators of Baby P did go to jail for a long time.
No, I'm talking about the social workers involved.
Okay, yeah, well,
the cover-up. There was a cover-up.
Well, that was the problem. Everybody pointed at everybody, didn't they?
Yeah, but...
And I think one woman, whose name I won't mention, but I can always remember, in fact, I think she sued because she was accused of being somehow culpable in all of that. But you're right. I mean, there are clearly areas, but are they cover-ups or are they screw-ups? I mean, Hugh Edwards didn't go to jail for what he had on his phone, but on the same day, 300 other blokes didn't go to jail for having something similar on their phone.
I'll tell you what should happen. This is what should happen, right? Number one, Mandelson should be nicked. I should have him in the police station and say, right, we'll do a deal with you. Give us all the rest of the people who you know. We'll give you a reduced sentence. Keir Starmer should fall on his sword straight away. And to be honest with you, the Labour, they should have a general election. This is just getting worse and
worse.
Has
it, you see, but Starmer was so, well, how was I supposed to know this? Also, I'm not a psychic. And, of course, misconduct in a public office is... the bar is really high to try and prove that. So...
Well, yeah, but, I mean, if you're the top... the buck stops with you. I was a senior projects manager, and one of my managers got... He had to go up to a tribunal accused of one of the residents had an injury. When he went in there, I knocked on the door, went into the tribunal and sat next to him. I said, "No, I'm just as culpable as you are." That's the type of... The buck stops at me.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's true enough, but I don't know whether, of course, Mandelson's power base predates Starmer even being an MP, I suppose, if you look at it that way. I think at the moment, Robert, I think the establishment, if that's the way to phrase it, would quite like to throw the book at Starmer. I think he would be, if there is a case to answer, and again, the problem with it is the bar is quite high, I think Starmer and co would be quite happy to lob him to the wolves. Rightly so. Robert, thank you very much indeed for that. Robert in Hertfordshire, more from you on the way. It's a really simple way to get in touch, 0344 499 1000. Let's get to the nub of this. Is it the British establishment that is corrupt, or just some wayward rogue individuals? Our lines are open. We'll take voice notes there as well. Right now, 2 o'clock. Let's get the latest news headlines right here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Afternoon, yeah, welcome back. Home of Common Sense and all of that, loads to get through. We're talking about the Epstein files continue to spill out scandals. Peter Mandelson accused by the Prime Minister of lying to him about his relationship with Epstein. And with the police set to investigate Mandelson over misconduct. How many more scandals will the establishment see? Is this one of the biggest? The more you think about it, the bigger this one is. I mean, it could end up potentially with someone going to jail. The whole offence of misconduct in a public office potentially carries life imprisonment. I wouldn't read too much into that because I think so does dropping litter, potentially. Connected to this, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has moved out of Royal Lodge amid the fallout over his links with Epstein. The former Duke of York relocated to Wood Farm Cottage, part of the King's Sandringham estate. And he's only there while he waits for his new home, Marsh Farm, to be completed. I think he's still doing all right. He will never want, put it that way. And the Welsh First Minister has blamed Netflix for the closure of pubs, insisting that people need to get out into the local area more if they want to save businesses. There's something in that. I mean, I wouldn't have thought ordinarily I'd be agreeing with the Welsh First Minister. But is there something in that? 0344 499 1000. is where you'll find us. People do stay in more. And staying in ain't what it used to be, of course, because you have your own cinema at home, essentially. A big old TV, bigger than you go into, you know, I don't know, PC World, Curry's, PC World, same shop. Go in there and you just check out the size of those mummers hanging on the wall. They are absolutely vast now. That stuff, I don't know what the average TV size is now being sold, but I would imagine 60-inch and over is pretty commonplace these days. So you've got 65, apparently, is the most, is that right? Is the most common. There we go, 65-inch. That's sizable stuff. So it looks like a cinema. You've got the choice of any programme, any film you ever wanted. You can pick up your phone. You'll have a curry round in 10 minutes. Dead simple. You can order your bits and pieces from Amazon, and if you get it at the right time, it might even arrive the same evening. So this sort of instant gratification society that has, without doubt, changed the way we kind of function, no doubt about that. But in terms of what it does for pubs and the like, the First Minister of Wales has been criticised for claiming the public need to stop watching Netflix if they want to save pubs. But as I said, not just pubs that are affected by modern day conveniences. Let's speak with Rory Hanrahan, who's a pub landlord and a writer. Rory, good afternoon to you. Nice to have you with us.
Hi, Ian. Nice to meet you, pal.
I don't know much about the Welsh First Minister. I don't imagine ordinarily I would listen to much of what she says, knowing who she represents. But is she actually onto something with this?
Well, a stop clock can be right twice, I suppose, Ian, can't it?
True,
and
true.
I find myself in a very odd position of actually saying that she's onto something when she says that governments... It's not government's jobs to get people to go outside, to go to shops, to go to pubs. And that would be absolutely right, except for the fact that the government has got in the way of pubs surviving since the late 90s and has, through one form or another, between VAT increases, between national insurance increases, minimum wage increases, the vast increase in business rates, have destroyed pubs, especially rural pubs. Drink driving, smoking bans, trying to change a culture, make us more European, make us more continental. The flip side of that, of course, is it's led to this vast epidemic of loneliness with older people. Shops are shut because there's no need to have the takeaway, the restaurant open, because people, as you say, they sit in front of the 65-inch TV, they put the feet up and they order the curry in the 4 cans. And 10 minutes later, it's there and it costs them very little.
Yeah. That's it, isn't it? I mean, it's the sort of instant gratification thing. And then, you know, it's fascinating, the kind of human journey, I suppose, Rory, you know, of how we've changed, our behaviour has changed. I mean, have a listen to this sound. We all know what that is. I mean, it's just a little boom. If you wrote that in your room as a teenager, you know, people would say, oh, he's starting to learn to play something. But actually, it turns out to be one of the most famous sort of, it's not even a jingle, it's like a sting, as it's called. But of course, it sounds, it reminds us all that Netflix is on and you're about to watch a new programme. That really has overtaken the way Brits function inside their own homes.
Completely. And one of the things is people don't change, but technology does. Yeah. And we haven't really wrapped our head around social media, technology, internet and instant gratification. And it doesn't necessarily do us any good. And we haven't developed ways to deal with it, how to switch off from it, how to, you know, turn the phone off and go out for the walk, take the dog for a walk, have a pint, talk to a human being. You know, have a Guinness Zero. You don't have to sit there and drink 20 pints. But once the pub is gone, of course, once the local shop is gone, it isn't coming back. And then you've lost all of that ability to socialise, to get out of the house. When the good things and the bad things happen, when you want to celebrate, when the kids come back, at Christmas from university, and you want to take them out, you want to take the son or the daughter out for a drink on the Sunday afternoon, there's nowhere to take them to.
Yeah.
And you lose that ability to communicate together.
Indeed. I mentioned this outfit or this organisation as well, Rory, as we were speaking. Have a listen.
Amazon Prime Day is here. 2 days of epic deals. Shop now.
I think my record of having something delivered is about 3.5 hours. I didn't even want it in 3.5 hours. It just arrived. Indeed, yeah. It said, you know, every now and again it says it'll arrive by 10 o'clock tonight, doesn't it? And you think, well, it doesn't. I don't need it by 10 o'clock. In fact, if it arrives at 10, I might be in bed, so I don't really. But once in a while, it kind of almost beats its own record and something shows up. But instant gratification. We want things now. And, you know, the smart money says, well, it's just cheaper to do it this way. But I think if you put it all together, I'm not sure it is.
Well, it's not necessarily cheaper, and I think there's a thing happening with subscription churn that's quite interesting. You know, so we've got Netflix, we've got Amazon Prime, we've got Paramount Plus, we might have Substack, we might have The Spectator or Spite, and there's a lot of that getting cancelled because those £5, those £8, those £4, all of a sudden you're looking at the month going, did I really spend £87, 120 quid, whatever, you know, and it adds up very quickly. And of course, the downside of Amazon Prime is that it's especially for older people in more isolated areas, is actually they want to talk to somebody in the shop. That might be the only person that they talk to that week when they go to collect the pension, when they buy the tin of beans and a loaf of bread. They're not there to collect the pension. They're there to talk to Mike or Rajit behind the counter and have half an hour of human contact.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And, of course, people often say, well, if you're staying in, then you're missing human contact. But, of course, there is also this. A bit of FaceTime. And there are lots of people who don't just sit there chatting to a mate. They often get a group of them. Every Wednesday, half a dozen of them meet, but not literally, just on a screen. And is it quite sad that people do that? Like, I don't want to go to the pub, but I do fancy a beer. I can get that delivered. I can watch the cinema on my own TV, and I can still have my mates, but just on my iPad.
Yeah, but we know the downside is this is for young people, especially entering the workforce for the first time. They're working from home. Yeah. When you first went into journalism, when you start first, you know, how much of it was mentoring by older men, older women, people who've been established that you would never have got to spend that time with unless you were physically together. And you make that connection through body language, through liking people, but also learning that actually sometimes you don't like people. And a lot of the work, a lot of your adult environment and being an adult is that you're going to meet people you don't like, and you're going to have to suck it up, buttercup, you know, and actually learn how to deal with people you don't like. Yeah. But realize that two things can be true at the same time, and this is a person you're going to have to deal with and work with maybe for 20 years. And if you don't build up those adult relationships, if you're not constantly challenged by life and people and entertained and amused and upset, what really are you at a certain point?
It's a great point. And on that point, my phone literally just went off. Rory, great to have you on with us. Let's speak again. There's lots in this. Rory Hanrahan is a pub landlord and writer. Thank you to him. The whole... here's the thing about all of that stuff. The Amazons and the Just Eats and Deliveroo and Netflix and FaceTime, all the things we can just do on a screen without literally moving from your sofa. I mean, you don't even have to answer the door to the Amazon guy. I mean, you do to the food delivery, obviously, otherwise you wouldn't get it. But to the food delivery guy, to the Amazon guy, they just leave it outside. Sometimes don't even knock. So you've got, you know, the change of life. If you showed our lifestyles to your nan or granddad, they would assume it was a film. Like, what do you mean you press a screen and somebody brings you food? What, and then you cook it? No, it's already cooked, Nan. Seriously? Yeah. And then they'll bring me some clothes that I've just bought and maybe a roll of sellotape because I've run out of that as well. And then I can sit and watch every TV programme and film that's ever been made. I can watch on my TV. Only you have to wait the next week for episode 2. No, I don't. Everything is there in front of us. So what is that? I mean, this is both genuinely mean this. I find it simultaneously amazing because I love that tech. It's great and it is convenient. I also find it utterly terrifying because I think it has changed us. And of course, any kid born today will only know that world. They will never have, Finn, our producer, is 24, looks about 44 by the way, he's 24. Even he knows a world before much of this. So it's still quite recent, But the more we go through this, that's just going to be what does it do to us as humans as such? Let's go to Francis in Doncaster on that issue of pubs. What are you thinking, Francis? Good afternoon to you.
Oh, good afternoon, Mr. Collins. I do love your show.
Thank you.
You speak eminent common sense, and you don't shout, and you don't speak so quickly that old ones like me can't follow what you're saying. Excuse me, right.
I do my
To
best.
the nub of my,
Fire away.
To the nub of my gist, sir. I am one of the oldest bass players in captivity.
Right.
And I'm in a small band, semi-pro, obviously, and it's getting harder and harder to find gigs, you know, because the pubs are closing.
Yep.
And for those who aren't, it's becoming economically harder and harder to put a band on, for example.
I was going to say
because
also it's not just the fact that the pubs are not as busy. Of course, if they're not as busy, they don't have necessarily the money to pay a band. And even if you're paying just a basic rate, you've got 3 musicians, you need to pay 3 people, whatever the going rate is in a particular area. And you can see that's
whatever they offer you.
Yeah, I mean that might be a couple of £100 that the pub cannot afford. It might be their profits for the whole night.
Exactly. I mean, in the olden days, lad, you know, they'd welcome you in. The bar would go mental, even if it wasn't a band anybody had heard of. They'd all turn out because it was something different.
Yeah.
Everybody could get loose and have a good time and everything.
Yeah.
And because the bar takings were so good, everybody won. But now I don't know where it's going. I think it's son of lockdown. You know, only this time we're locking ourselves down.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, we don't need to be told to be locked down. We've done it.
No, we're just doing it
voluntarily.
And the state's very happy with that because it makes it easier to find us and tell us what to bloody do.
Listen, you're gonna hate me here, Francis. And I don't want our relationship, which was only just started, to end on a bad note.
Oh, indeed.
I'm not a massive fan of music in pubs.
All right, fair enough. There used to be. It used to be the case where in a village, say there were 3, one of which put live music on, one of which had sports on the telly, and the other was just sit and have a quiet pint.
I think it's that. It literally does depend. I mean, there is a pub I go into and there's a fella that stands there with a guitar just knocking out tunes, and he's quite good, and he's not too, you know, people can eat their food, and that works really well. I think he does all right, actually. He gets quite a lot of bookings, I think, from passing clientele. But when you've got a band and you're out with a couple of mates, you can't hear anyone. Now, I sound like the old one here.
What sort of band it is? I mean, if you're sensible about it, you can modify your approach according to the demographic in the room. Is it the predominantly older person?
True.
Which is great, because they'd remember most of the stuff I like anyway.
What kind of stuff do you play, Francis? What would be...
Oh, gosh, what do we do? I don't know if you've heard of John Martin, the late John Martin.
Go on.
Had the album Solid Air.
Okay.
Back in the 70s. Well, we started with that, not doing note-for-note covers, because if you want that, you'll go home and play the CD anyway, or even the gramophone record.
Right, so you don't just do standard covers?
No, that's right. Some of it's originals, some of it's sort of 60s, 70s, maybe a bit of 80s based material. Like I said, we don't do note-for-note covers.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, that, you know...
Have you got a go-to? Have you got, like, if somebody comes up to you, you're in a pub, someone comes, Francis, go on, knock one out for us, mate. What would you do?
Probably borrow the leader's guitar and do that, because when you're a bass player, you are somewhat limited.
Yeah, well, yes, indeed. You do sort of... There is, I don't want to say relegated. I think you're right, limited, because what would a band be without a good bass player?
Well, I was just trying to think of a name for a band that hasn't got a very good bass player.
Yeah, well, the Bassless 7, I think, were probably the most famous. But listen, Francis, great to have you on with us. Glad to see and hear that you're still playing music, but I can totally understand how, if that is somebody's livelihood, that it kind of gets harder. Because, of course, a pub needs a budget to pay for a band. And if they haven't got people in the pub, they haven't got the extra budget, and they haven't got people in the pub because they're at home watching Netflix, ordering Deliveroo. Although I have to say, that's not... I mean, the thing that goes against this argument, ordering the takeaway food, that's not the cheapest way to do food, right? That really isn't. I think it's one of the most expensive. I've had some shockers. You know, when you tick them, I'll have some of that, we'll have some of that. And then you look at the total and you think, what? No, I'm not paying that. No. I'll go back and I'll re-tick those boxes. 0344 499 1000. That's where you'll find us. More comment on the way. We're talking about the British establishment. We're talking about, has Netflix changed our lives, in the sense that pubs aren't doing so well, partly because of Netflix. I think this government's business rates, minimum wage requirements, national insurance raise, I think that probably has a factor in this. Quite a big one, actually. Lines are open. This is Talk.
A pub. You know, we all think we're worth more, and I do think you should pay nurses more. I do think doctors do deserve a pay rise, but I'm worried this next generation of doctors don't see medicine like that. I worry that they see it as a little bit of a cash cow, and that they're thinking we can just keep voting to strike, which should be a last resort. We are putting people at harm. There is no way these doctors will be striking and not putting the NHS backwards or putting patients at risk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
22 minutes after 2 o'clock. The bigger question, and the more serious question, there's a lot going on here this afternoon, was this about the British establishment. We're thinking obviously the Mandelson, Prince Andrew story, and lots of others over the years as well, where you would point to malfeasance and corruption and an establishment that just doesn't work. Is it the establishment? Is it just individuals? You know, we blame individuals for corruption. We blame Peter Mandelson for his own downfall. Nobody else made him do it. It wasn't the establishment, as it were, that made him decide to allegedly spew things to a billionaire paedophile. G says, I would disagree with Isabel. Isabel Oakshott was with us earlier. Doing it for money somewhat confirms the motive. And if the UK can't do it, I'd say it's worse, as power and ego are the only justification. I think with Mandelson, it was definitely I know he got a few quid off Epstein. I don't think there's a direct correlation, but it wasn't like, you send me this information and I'll send you some money. I don't think, and that doesn't let Mandelson off the hook, by the way, because even without the money thing, he's still up to his neck in it, and then some. I think he was just drunk on power. I think he loved the power. I think the Epstein thing was... it was bullseye territory for Mandelson. He couldn't believe he was part of the inner circle. And somebody had said to him, one of the things he did, according to those Epstein files, was that he messaged him hours before Gordon Brown resigned, before the 2010 election. Now, that in itself is a sensitive area. Money markets react to a prime minister resigning. So he messaged him. But if somebody had said to him while he was probably walking outside the cabinet room or one of the offices in Downing Street, there he was on his little BlackBerry at the time, firing off messages, think Gordon's going to be gone in a few hours. Somebody had said to him, you do know, Peter, in 15 years' time, 16 years' time, that one message, I mean, along with others, but even just that one message is going to come back and haunt you and utterly bury you. I know you're the boomerang man that keeps coming back, but you won't come back from this one. But he never thought that far ahead in that respect. Bobby says, Labour MP after Labour MP who denied us a grooming gang inquiry are standing up and backing Starmer on the Mandelson question. 9 months ago, they couldn't give a damn about British girls who are being raped today. What the hell has international relations or trade got to do with Starmer releasing all the security papers on Mandelson, says Robbie. It's a great point, right? It's a great point. Oh, yes, because it's now very... we're very transparent. One of our own has done something wrong. So, yes, have an inquiry. But very resistant to the other one, as Robbie perfectly encapsulates there. Ben is in Essex on this point. What have you got, Ben? Afternoon.
Afternoon, Ian.
Hiya.
Yeah, I think the establishment is corrupt because of the individuals. It's a bit like a chicken and the egg thing, isn't it? But I was watching the Prime Minister and I don't believe anything that he says, and I think many people would agree. And there has to be harsh consequences for this Peter Mandelson. Otherwise, if there isn't, I've got a feeling it just shows that the establishment is corrupt. Because I wouldn't be surprised if the commissioner has spoken to the PM and said, "Look, we've got Peter. What are we going to do with him? Because if we have to, give consequences, then we're all going to have to, we're all going to be impeded, and it'll be interesting to see what happens."
But does it, Ben? Sorry to interject, but just on that point, if it turns out that there isn't, that it doesn't quite hit the threshold to prosecute him criminally, that wouldn't necessarily mean there's been a cover-up, though.
Not necessarily, but I mean,
because I think they will. I think they want to go for this guy now.
I'd like to think so. I mean, if he's been, isn't it treason if you're giving away state secrets and things that to other countries about our countries? That really should be dealt with harshly.
Well, I think whether you call it treason or whether it's many of the other potential crimes that it might be, but if you're leaking plans for the government's proposed £20 billion sale of assets, then I would suggest, without even knowing much about international trade, that probably puts you in deep water.
Exactly. I mean, I don't know much about it or what the facts are, but it just goes to show that there is a lot of corruption in our establishment. And us, the public, I think, and I don't know whether it'll happen, but we've got a duty to stand up to this and say, look, we need better than this, because these people are representing us, our democracy, our country, and it's an absolute disgrace.
Complete. I get it. Ben, thank you very much indeed. All I keep hearing is that it's quite hard to prosecute under that specific offence of misconduct in public office. There are, I'm told, there are civil offences that carry unlimited fines and criminal offences under the Criminal Justice Act 1993, where there can be a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison. Certainly the maximum penalty for misconduct in a public office is life imprisonment. That would never happen, but it's there nonetheless. Goes back to 1783 when they had the first trial of this, and it was a fella, as I mentioned, at the beginning called Charles Bembridge, who was an accountant, and he was jailed following a trial. He was working with I think it was the Paymaster General, and didn't declare the Paymaster General's biggest sums of money or something of that order. And he got 6 months in jail, but he got fined. If you didn't hear this a little earlier, he got fined £2,650 in 1783. That's the equivalent of being fined £518,629 today. I've no idea how poor old Mr. Bembridge paid that, but that was the fine. That's pretty hefty stuff, isn't it? Let's go to Charlie in East Sussex on all of this. Charlie, what are you thinking? Afternoon.
Good afternoon. The Prince of Darkness. Who on earth would think anything could possibly go wrong?
Do you know what, Charlie? Yesterday on this programme, I was trying to think of all the many names that they've given. Mandy was always one of them, which some people said was a little bit homophobic. I don't think it was said for that reason. Prince of Darkness, it was in my head and I couldn't remember it. That's how he used to be referred to.
That's right. Ian, I think what we've got to look at here is the type of people that we are electing to govern us.
Yeah.
And I think this goes back perhaps beyond Tony Blair even. I mean, who on earth wrote down on that little piece of paper, lawyers are the best people to govern us? Oh, my giddy aunt. Yeah. I think when you look at people, particularly now, as you can see their whole mindset, what they believe in, whether they actually believe in anything with our current Prime Minister, they're not 100% committed to the country. There's always an underlying agenda that these people are pushing towards. And, we keep electing them. And so whose fault is that? Is it our own fault?
It's a good point. It's a good point. I mean, is it kind of splintering out now? Because you're right. And just asking this question today about the British establishment, we often talk about this thing called groupthink, Charlie, which weaves its way around every institution. Groupthink, protecting the institution. These unwritten things that people just kind of, even unwittingly, join in with, and politicians are right up there. So you end up with, well, this is the way it is. This is the one. You have to press the flesh and break bread with millionaires and billionaires and people you don't like, but underneath it all, they're quite helpful to us. And Labour are actually the worst for this, Charlie, because supposedly they don't do this kind of thing, right? It's the wicked Tories or the wicked reformers that do this kind of corrupt stuff, not us nice socialists. But actually, they're the worst for it because they're perpetually telling us they're beyond corruption.
Well, do you know what? I think you're right. I was thinking about this and I thought to myself, let's have a look at the worst sort of right, and I'm not talking, guys from many, many years ago in Europe. I'm talking about the worst right-wingers that we have now, or so-called right-wingers. I would rather trust those guys than the people we've got in power. Yeah. And I think the public are sort of, and you're right about this splintering, but I think the public have sort of, in the past, resigned themselves to think, oh, it's either them or it's them. But yes. Now, there are lots of options on the table now, and I think, when as a voter, and I'm a right-leaning voter, and I don't mind admitting that. But you've got to say to yourself, yeah, there is more choice out there. But again, we don't want to be having the wool pulled over our eyes by these people. I think if anybody gets into power, other than the main two parties, we'll all be looking for so much. And I just hope they don't disappoint, and that's the way I see it.
Indeed, Charlie, I like it. Thank you. Good thoughts from Charlie in East Sussex. 0344 499 1000. Rob in Taplow says, this is back to the question of Netflix. Has it ruined British pubs? Rob says, Netflix, bottle of wine, £6. Go to the bar, £30. Younger people simply cannot afford it. It's a great point, isn't it? And it's not even just younger people. It also doesn't matter if you can afford it either. You can go to the bar and buy a round, and you know there's a few of you there, and suddenly somebody goes, yeah, it's £42.80. £42.80? What the hell? What do I get for that? A puppy as well? 42 quid. There's only 6 of us. Oh yeah, I guess it would be. Unbelievable. That would explain it in a simple sentence. Rob, thank you for that. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
25 to 3 on Talk. As I mentioned, the study by the British Medical Journal that claims that trans athletes who were born male have no advantage over women. Now, I had to read that twice because I thought, well, there must be a typo in there somewhere, surely. Apparently not. They're arguing there is no justification for a ban on trans women taking part in women's sport. The report, however, has sparked criticism from academics and sex-based rights campaigners who point out flaws in the way that this survey was conducted. Let's speak to Mara Yamanouchi, who is a former Olympic runner. Mara, nice to have you with us. Look, I mean, people make reports, and naturally in academia and other areas of research, you know, it does sometimes depend which angle you come from, how objective these things are. Without knowing too much about the world of sport in this sense, or too much about the anatomy either, I smell a bit of a rat here, am I right?
I think you're right to smell a rat. The key thing about this meta-analysis of 52 individual studies is they haven't, the quality of the data is poor, and the authors have admitted that. So really we shouldn't be drawing any conclusions from it, but they have drawn conclusions, as you just explained in your introduction.
Yeah.
But the key flaw with it is that these studies have not controlled for fitness, so they're not comparing like with like. So, you know, an analogy is you and I go and do a running race. I would probably win because I've been an elite athlete. Therefore, you conclude women are faster than men at running. You know, it's nonsense.
Yeah.
I haven't controlled for these fundamental variables to make any conclusions robust. But apart from what this study goes into, there's one really key point, which is men will never be women. Men who believe they are women can do anything they want to their bodies within the law. They can take hormones, have surgery, wear women's clothes, grow their hair long, etc. None of that will ever make them female and never make them a woman. And women's sports are for those of us born female. So, you know, these trans-identifying males can do what they want. These academics who basically are trans activists can do all the research they want. At the end of the day, it's irrelevant because men will never be women, and women's sports are for females.
Yeah, and what's interesting about you saying that, we were discussing this, Mara, in the office before the programme, about how what you've just said there is completely non-controversial. If you had to buy a dictionary called Things That Aren't Controversial, that'd be number one on there. And this conversation 15 years ago would have sparked no debate whatsoever. But here we are in this rather interesting, and I don't know how we got here. Maybe that's a whole other debate, maybe. But now we have pylons, and we have people who, social media, of course, plays its part in all of this, that almost want to end somebody's life because they dare to suggest that men should not take part in women's sport. And I have no idea why that would be a basis of contention.
Yeah, I mean, you get cancelled for stating facts, speaking the truth, saying things like humans cannot change sex. Yeah, we are where we are. But I have to say that, you know, journals like the British Journal of Sports Medicine, which this article has been published in, have played their part in that. They are publishing this absolute nonsense, which has no credibility, and sadly some people will believe it. Another thing I want to mention about these studies that this paper has analysed is the trans-identifying males who are the subjects of the research. They have an incentive to underperform in these performance tests. You know, many, perhaps all of them, will want to compete in women's sport because they can earn good money for being not very good in some cases. So they'll get on a treadmill run. They can just deliberately go slowly and say, oh, yes, that's the best I can do. And the researchers will conclude, oh, they're the same as women, you know. The fundamental sort of nature of these experiments is flawed because all these athletes can underperform. And it's also a gross insult to say that men who are hobbled by taking hormones or whatever are women. You know, women must be celebrated for what we are. We are different to men. We don't have the same physical advantages that men have. But nevertheless, we need to be celebrated as the best female athletes we are. In 2009, I was ranked second in the world in the marathon, yet 1,300 men ran faster than me. You know, should I be celebrated as the second best in the world, or kind of ignored as the 1,301st person in the world at the marathon?
So, yeah, I mean, that rather kind of beautifully explains the nonsense of all of this. And, you know, what you've just been saying there, I mean, I've got a 7-year-old. I think he could understand that. I don't think that, it doesn't, again, it doesn't take you don't have to be a clinician or an athlete or anyone, really, to work out what is literally, I mean, this is Emperor's New Clothes territory with booster rockets on.
Yeah, I mean, because the male and female performance in sport overlaps, you know, you will get situations where not very fit, overweight, for example, men will run the same times as much more athletic, well-trained, fit females. You can't then conclude, oh, they're the same, therefore competition between them is fair.
Yeah.
Because males have an advantage. You know, there are plenty of unfit, overweight men in the world. You know, do we put them in women's sport? No.
Yeah, that would, well, maybe we should. That would be, it'd be interesting as a spectator activity, that's for sure. In terms of, I mean, things that are quite obvious, you know, I mean, Sharon Davis, as I'm sure you're aware, also speaks very well on this and talks through, you know, some of the specifics of bone structure and muscle mass and goodness knows what. I mean, it's really not hard to understand. So why do you think there are, you know, you can understand a few political agitators who want to mess things up and, you know, argue this point. Interesting, not always trans people either, just those who are in that part of the political spectrum who seem to be very animated about this. But so we see those people, but then we see experts, as we hear with this British medical journal, supposed experts, come out and say it. And that's where I sort of think, what sort of upside down world are we living in when one would assume that people behind the British Medical Journal, some of them are probably qualified doctors and the like. What the heck is going on?
Well, there are a number of reasons which explain how we've got where we are. I mean, on sport, two of the studies that this study analysed were written by Joanna Harper and Blair Hamilton, who are both males who say they're women who've competed in women's sport. So they have an incentive to prove that trans women have no advantage over women. I think it's also male entitlement. So these men want to be in women's sports, women's prisons, toilets, changing rooms, rape crisis centres, the lot.
Yeah.
And they just help themselves. They have absolutely no respect for women's boundaries. And the people who are in the positions of power who could say no are just too cowardly.
I think that's correct.
To say no.
Yeah, I think they are scared. They think it sounds a little bit like an ism. Is it racism, homophobia? Is it in the same ballpark? Spoiler alert, it's not in the same ballpark, this debate, but there is a group of people that sort of think it is, and if they don't go along with it, and we've seen this with, big corporations when it comes to the box you tick, which gender are you? And they list 100 of them, and you think, really? And I think they're joining in with something because they think it makes them kinder in a curious way.
Yeah, I mean, we've had, gay rights, civil rights for ethnic minorities. All of those fights were good things, and people shouldn't be discriminated against on their sexual orientation or their skin colour. But this is different. Trans-identifying males are males, and males are adult human males, or men, in other words.
Yep.
They have the lion's share of everything. They have better pay than women. They have the lion's share of sport, top jobs. They control everything. These are not marginalized, stigmatized people. They're a subgroup of men. And people in positions of power really need to summon up the courage to say no to them. What I think this really boils down to in the end is male entitlement and the inability of too many people to say no to men's demands. I mean, for some of them also it is a sex fetish. Many of these men have what's called autogynephilia. They have a fetish. They want to be validated by women, and they use female athletes in sport, female prisoners in the female prisoner state, women in endometriosis support groups as validation for their beliefs that they are women. But humans can't change sex, I'm afraid, so they never will be women.
Indeed. You said right at the beginning, Mara, you could probably beat me in a race. I'm not so sure about that. But
okay,
actually,
let me know when we'll do it.
Yeah, you still, I mean, as you say, you've had an impressive career in running track and field, cross country, you name it. Are you still out there on a daily basis, pounding the pavements or the fields?
Yeah, I try to run 4 to 5 times a week. I'm 52 now, and it's a long time since I retired. Yeah. I'm currently nursing an injury. But yeah, I love to run. It's good for my physical and mental health. I coach as well, so I need to stay fit.
So if I take you on with the injury, then I've got a chance.
Maybe.
What's an average run for you? How long is an average run distance?
Nowadays I do maybe 40 minutes to an hour, sometimes shorter. I think I've got a lot of wear and tear.
Well, you've been doing it all your life. What sort of distance is that then, if you do sort of an hour's run?
I run about 4.5 minutes per kilometre, so 45 minutes would be roughly 10k.
Right. You do that 4 times a week?
Yes, try to stay fit. Yeah. If I try to do too much or go too fast, I end up with injuries. But let me know the date of our race, and I'll be there.
All right. What about 4:30? Mara, great to have you on with us. We will speak again, I'm sure. That's Mara Yamauchi, who is a former Olympic runner and still runs, 10k a week, about 4 times a week. Man alive. 10k a week, 4 times. There you go, Finn, because Finn likes a bit of gym. I'm fortunate that I was born with a specific gene that has made me, I think the phrase scientifically is pretty perfect, so I don't need to do it as much, but that's big. I mean, 10k is I don't know what the average person runs in this country, but I'm going to guess it's not anything like that. And she's a woman, by the way. If anybody thought, well, is she a secret? Has she been secretly put there by the trans lobby to sell an argument so we can then attack and have another row? Because that comes out from time to time. No, and she speaks common sense, and it's not controversial, as I said right the way throughout. How did that ever get to a point where it was weird that somebody should make the point that a woman should be in a woman's race and a man should be in a man's race? Grace is down in London. What are you thinking, Grace? Good afternoon. On this very point, hi.
Hi. I would concur with you that I think some people feel that it's kind to be affirming, but I don't think that always agreeing with people or affirming people's views is necessarily the only way to be kind or the best way to be kind. I mean, as a Christian country, historically, we've believed in a God who offers kindness even whilst he disagrees with some of the things that we do. But we've now moved towards a society where commercialism is kind of giving us the message that we always should get what we want. And so if a man says that he wants to participate in something, we kind of feel like that the kindest thing to do is to let him. But actually, that's not necessarily the best way to show kindness and compassion. And it's really concerning when you've got the BMJ regurgitating some of this, because we really need to hold on to objective reality, to scientific truth. I mean, I was disturbed particularly a little while ago when the BMJ published that article about FGM. And it was as though this publication, which really should be relied upon...
What did they... Did you say FGM?
Yes.
Yeah, what did they say about it?
They had some academics write that FGM shouldn't necessarily be considered to be wrong or bad.
Yes, this was quite recent, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I just thought we're losing objective moral truths. We're losing touch with reality about what is right and wrong and good and bad. And it's so incredibly insulting to the little girls who are from the poorest parts of the world, who have suffered unimaginably, to suggest that the culture that they're born into is more important than their own lives and pain. And it's as though people feel good about themselves by saying, well, we'll endorse this, we'll affirm this.
Well, it kind of...
People suffer.
Yeah, it sort of happens across the spectrum in so many different ways, you know, which is why you'll never get left-wingers properly decry the Taliban, because they can't bring themselves to insult somebody who comes from that part of the world who might be a different skin colour. I genuinely believe, Grace, that it's kind of as... I know that simplifies it, but I think it is that simple. Grace, always good to have you on. Thank you. 0344 499 1000. People want to be kinder and nicer, and yeah, what's wrong with a little bit of casual female genital mutilation along the way if it means cultural norms are upheld and all this kind of old horrendous and sometimes very dangerous nonsense that gets wheeled out. 0344 499 1000. Back with your calls in a couple of moments. And the voice of doom, day 10, I think it is. Stand by for that. This is Talk.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
That's Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCounts.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Suits, and that's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beard, and I feel
Raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of its desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This from Nikki in Bristol. Says, afternoon, Ian. I believe the British establishment is deeply corrupt because too many decisions serve insiders, donors and political interests ahead of ordinary citizens. Accountability is weak, transparency selective, and when mistakes are made, consequences rarely reach the top. Trust isn't lost by accident, it's lost through patterns of behaviour. That's brilliant. It's so beautifully put. It comes to the groupthink and always protect the establishment. Think of the post office. You know, when that scandal emerged, and it emerged a long while ago, but it didn't really get the traction. We covered it years ago. And I remember saying to the journalist at the time, Nick, that, you know, this surely should be on the front page every day. He said, well, you'd think so. Eventually it was. But there was this immediate curtain of secrecy that just comes down, just effortlessly. Nothing to see here. Everything's fine. We got it right. We did our investigations. Nothing wrong with these computers. And they keep that up. And I don't think they've all gone to some kind of moronic training course that teaches them that. It just sort of happens. Happens in the NHS, certainly when there's neglect or something of that nature, or there is a senior clinician or manager that has done something a little bit iffy, or in worst cases something lethal. When you see those, there is still that sort of veneer of, you know, well, you're going to have to really dig deep to find it because we got no one's got anything to say. And it closes down and the groupthink thing takes place and all the various characters are of similar type and they employ friends or colleagues or just associates that are of similar type. So you end up with this kind of replicated doppelganger group of characters that are running stuff. And so they think the same, they act the same, and then that's how you end up with this kind of establishment thing. Sometimes things don't get investigated, literally, because they can't, it's too much trouble. It's almost too much trouble. Not only is it harmful to the institution concerned, it's just too much trouble and effort. Very quickly, we can talk to Chris in Bournemouth in just 1 second. The Voice of Doom. This is day 10 of The Voice of Doom. Remember, it's a politician you're looking for. It's mystery voice. It's a politician you're looking for. Left wing, right wing, male, female, young or old, dead or alive. Who is this?
This is your chance.
If you think you know, 87222. Here it is again.
This is your chance.
If we get a right answer. It's not Rupert Lowe, by the way. It's not Rupert Lowe. But if you think you know who it is, 87222. We'll tell you after the news if we get a right answer. One more time.
This is your chance.
Come on, somebody out there must know it, surely. Chris is in Bournemouth. Back to Mandelson and corruption and the establishment. Chris, what have you got for us?
Good afternoon, Ian.
Afternoon.
I think it's time that Keir Starmer actually fell on his sword. I'm sorry, but at the end of the day, Ian, if you can't keep an eye on what your employees are doing, and he employed Mandelson to go out and be whatever he was in the United States, if he hasn't got an angle on Mandelson for what he did, then he shouldn't be in government.
So that would I mean, if you were Starmer's lawyer, they would say, well, how would he know what he had done 20 years ago?
It's hard to say 20 years ago, but just recently, Ian, he employed him to go out to the States to represent the UK.
Yep.
And there isn't a person on this earth that can tell me that Keir Starmer didn't know what Mandelson was up to. He must have known.
But no one else knew at that time, did they? I mean, that's the reason they had to get rid of him as the ambassador. So it wasn't public, but are you sensing then, Chris, that someone in the security services might have known?
Yes.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I think, I'm pretty sure, I'm not blaming Gordon Brown, by the way, but although he did employ him at one point, I'm pretty sure Gordon Brown must have known that Peter Mandelson knew Jeffrey Epstein. I'm sure he must have known that. Listen, Chris, I've got to run. You made a great point. Did he? I mean, that's what it did. He know? He must have known. Did he know something? They must have known that he knew Epstein. And then it's just a case of doing the chronology, isn't it? And did he know him then? And did he know him then? Voice of Doom, will we get a winner to this?
This is your chance.
If you think you know, 87222. Let's get the news headlines at 3 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
We are talking about all things corrupt. We're talking about the British establishment. Therefore, we are talking about Jeffrey Epstein, Peter Mandelson and Prince Andrew. How many more layers to this horrendous, horrific scandal can it be? The police have got involved now, 2 police forces, to investigate both of the aforementioned. Is the British establishment corrupt, or is it just individuals within it that are corrupt? We'll take more comments on that as well. As I mentioned as well, Prince Andrew, or Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, as he's now known, he's moving house. The Right Move boys came good, and he's legged it from Royal Lodge after that fallout over his links with Epstein, and he's moved over to Wood Farm Cottage. He's only there for a little bit while they get things decorated, because where he's going to end up is in Marsh Farm, and when that's all completed, he gets a freebie house. Nothing like in the place he lived before, apparently, but I tell you what, I bet it's a bit more dapper and larger than my place. And the Welsh First Minister has blamed Netflix for closures of pubs, insisting that people need to get out into their area a little more if they want to save businesses. I mean, there's some truth in that, but it's very expensive to go out, and it's not so expensive to buy yourself a couple of beers and watch the telly indoors. More on that as well. 0344 499 1000. John in Wallington says, I've never in my lifetime seen the establishment look so exposed and vulnerable. I get the feeling the mask of respectability has been torn off and it's every man for himself. I think, I'd like to think, if you go to the House of Commons and you speak to MPs, one thing when I first went down there and joined the press gallery some years ago, the one thing I discovered, although I'd spent a lot of years beforehand interviewing many of these people, but when you're in that building, you get to know a few of them. You get to see them. You can speak to them off the record. You can speak to them in the bars. There's all of that. The one thing that jumped out to me was the people I thought, even growing up, because you see faces down there and you think, wow, they were infatuous. I remember getting in the lift with Geoffrey Howe once, and thinking, wow, he was wearing a little pair of slippers as well. He was in the House of Lords by this stage. You see all these characters. All the people I thought were going to be the good guys were just arses, frankly. And all the people that I thought were going to be the aforementioned actually turned out to be all right. So you met some really nice people who quite surprised you. And I think most of them, on balance, are pretty decent people, of whatever part. They go in for mostly good reasons. It's a job I wouldn't want to do for love nor money. The hours are excruciating if you do it properly. It's never ending, and if you go up the ladder, even if you make cabinet level, great for the ego, great for the free car, great for the red case, not so great for your family life, social life or anything else. So it's got, pluses and minuses in there. But I do think most people go in for good reasons, and they're not corrupt or criminally minded. But I just think it's very easy to fall into the word groupthink, to fall into the status quo, the conventions. And before you realise it, you might be up to your neck in it. And some of you, like Mandelson, enjoying it. We've got a lot to talk about. Let's talk about another political story. I don't know if you saw this. Reform UK's Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick made a serious blunder last night as they voted with Labour to scrap the two-child benefit cap. This is amidst confusion that Nigel Farage dropped his support for abolishing the two-child cap, instead calling for it to be retained to fund support for pubs. It was a bit of a howler. Kevin Schofield, political editor at HuffPost UK, often helps us out with these kind of stories. Afternoon to you, Kevin.
Hi, Ian.
Have you also found that as well down there at the good old House of Commons? It surprises you who the good guys are.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit like society at large, isn't it?
Yeah, true.
Some good people, some bad people, so it's pretty reflective of it. I mean, I find, by and large, they are in it for the right reasons. They're fairly ordinary people trying to make the best of as you say, a very difficult job. They don't always get it right, far from it. Like yourself, I wouldn't do it for £1 million a year. Yeah, there's good eggs and there's bad eggs, and it's up to the voters, I guess, to try, and journalists to try and identify the ones that are bad and then get them kicked out come the next election. Well, let's talk about two eggs who are have just made an error, in fact, and that's Braverman and Jenrick, who I'm sure it's happened before somewhere along the line, often probably with the help of alcohol, but in this case they made a genuine blunder in voting in the wrong direction for the scrapping of the two-child benefit cap. I mean, you can't reverse that, can you? No. So last night, Reform, the spin they were putting out was that they quickly realised their mistake. They left the aye lobby, the yes lobby, and their vote wasn't registered. But actually, if you look at the official record, their vote was registered. So they were the only two Reform MPs who voted with the government to scrap the cap. 5 other Reform MPs, Nigel Farage didn't vote at all, he wasn't around, but the other 5 did, and they voted the correct way. So it just looks really bizarre that there was a split. Now, there's not an ideological split. They weren't rebelling. They literally walked into the wrong lobbies. Now, you could say it is embarrassing. Of course it is. How on earth did they manage that? But a lot of it falls on Lee Anderson because he is Reform's chief whip.
Yeah.
And he's only got 8 or 7 others.
Yeah, he's not exactly got to go running around Portcullis House to find them, is he?
Well, exactly. And he went in the correct lobby as far as Reform is concerned, but somehow didn't manage to shepherd Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick the right way. So you can imagine Labour MPs last night were cock-a-hoop at this rather embarrassing blunder by these 2 MPs who only 2 or 3 weeks ago defected from the Conservatives.
I mean, it would have been such a great story if it was one of those votes that was won by 2. But of course, it was a massive win for the government that MPs backed it 458 to 104. But nonetheless, it's a bit humiliating.
Oh, yeah, undoubtedly it is. There's been no official explanation from Reform. I think they're trying to just pretend it didn't happen, really. There's no explanation as to how on earth they managed to walk through the wrong lobby. I mean, I suppose one other possible explanation is that, as you mentioned earlier, Reform's position on it has shifted. When the government first announced that they were going to lift the cap, Reform were in favour of it. Reform said, that's right, we should lift the cap. Now they want to keep the cap for British-born citizens whose 2 parents are in full-time work. So their position has shifted on it as well. But again, I don't think that was what happened last night.
No.
It's really, they just didn't know where to go, took a punt, walked into the wrong lobbies, and by the time they realised the mistake, it was too late. Their vote had been registered the wrong way as far as Reform are concerned.
Yeah, and I wonder if in the first place, when Farage first talked about his support before they changed positions on this, was that a kind of Reform way of saying, look, we're not archetypally right wing. We have views across the spectrum. Was that what he was doing? Maybe hoovering up the odd floating Labour voter?
Yeah, I think he was probably thinking in the red wall seats, perhaps.
Yeah.
A lot of sort of working class traditional Labour voters may well be impacted by this policy. It would mean they would benefit from the cap being removed. So he thought, right, well, I better not annoy those voters because I need them on side. But then, as I say, he did shift his position. He sort of nuanced it. He says he wasn't completely in favour of the cap. It should only apply to those who are not British-born citizens. So it's a little bit confusing. Yesterday, they tried to finesse the policy further by saying that the money that would be raised by doing that could be ploughed into helping pubs. But again, this is something that Reform are going to have to deal with as they get closer to the next election. They're actually going to have to come up with some policies, and they'll be there to be shot at.
Just while you're with us, Kevin, talking to Nigel Farage, he's been accused of running scared of a head-to-head debate. Who was it by? Well, Zach Polansky, that fella from the Green Party. He accused Farage of running scared after Farage rejected a head-to-head debate invitation. Now, I'm not here to side with anyone on this, trying to be very objective, but I don't imagine Mr. Farage would be scared of debating Mr. Polansky.
No, and it would be good for journalists. I think it'd be quite good fun to watch them because they're both pretty decent communicators, obviously coming from completely opposite ends of the political spectrum. I think it would be quite an entertaining spectacle. The genesis of this argument was Zia Youssef. First of all, as you know, he's the head of policy for Reform. He challenged Zach Polansky to a head-to-head debate ahead of the Gorton and Denton by-election. Zach Polansky said, no, I'll only debate with your leader. You're not the leader. I'll only debate with Nigel Farage. It was put to Nigel Farage yesterday, and he said, absolutely no way. And now Zach Polansky's hit back. So whether Nigel Farage decides to hit back at Zach Polansky hitting back, I don't know. But
it could be that. I am surprised because, as you say, it would be sort of box office stuff. I mean, Polansky, I personally think is very overrated in terms of his... I mean, for some reason, he's sort of done this green populism thing. And people often suggest that he's kind of doing a sort of Nigel Farage, but of the left. Maybe it's just me. I don't really see that. I don't know quite why his star has risen. To me, he's a little bit clunky. I don't think he looks great. I know Nigel Farage isn't about to enter any beauty contests either, but it's not really about that. I just sense that Farage is a natural, sort of in that Tony Benn, Dennis Skinner way, sort of natural orator and an arguer and does so without scripts. I don't see Polansky in that same arena. So I would have thought, it would be an obvious one, particularly with a by-election coming, that Farage would have gone, yeah, we'll take this.
Yeah, I mean, the line that he used yesterday was, if you wrestle with a chimney sweep, you get covered in soot. So I think that the suggestion was he didn't want to stoop down to Zach Polanski's level. But, you know, if you look at the opinion polls, Reform obviously have been leading the polls now for a long, long time. Greens are ticking along, picking up a few Labour votes, Lib Dem votes here and there. Who knows, maybe closer to the next election, it might well be we're looking at potentially, I'm not suggesting for a second that Zach Polanski will be the Prime Minister after the next election, but it could well be. It'd be quite an interesting head-to-head. You've got Zach Polanski on the left, Nigel Farage on the right, an opportunity. You know, voters, I think it's safe to say, are pretty cynical where Labour and the Conservatives are concerned right now. Why not give them at least the option of watching these two duke it out? But right now, it's not on the horizon.
I reckon Netflix, you know, could sell that. Actually, I think it could, and both parties, you know, they buy into all sorts now, whether it's boxing or whatever, and do the box office thing, but on TV. I reckon I'd pay a £5.
I mean, well, I suppose it's my job, so I would have to. But
well, similarly here, but I would genuinely like to see it.
I would then claim it back on expenses, obviously.
I'll tell you what, I'll pay for both of us, Kevin. We'll get the beers in and we'll sit there. This is for a debate that's not actually going to happen. So,
I think I would more willing to pay that than to pay a £5 to watch me and you. Go at it, you know. But anyway,
that's true enough.
You take your money, you take your choice.
You do indeed. Kevin, great to have you on again. Thank you, Kevin Schofield, political editor at HuffPost UK. Thank you to him. Really surprised that Farage hasn't just jumped at that one. What sort of risks do you run? You potentially, but that's the same in any political debate. I mean, Farage is arguably the best at the political debate. It's interesting. That doesn't mean to say that necessarily you are a supporter of that party. Jeremy Corbyn was the best when he was up against Theresa May. He absolutely wiped the floor with her in terms of those kind of head-to-heady political things. But it's not going to happen. 0344 499 1000. Back to the big question. This will be Richard down in London. On the establishment and all things Mandelson related, Richard, what have you got for us? Hi.
Hey, yes, again, very, very dramatic events, but he's always been a nasty piece of work, and I think looking back, I mean, if you look over the last sort of 25, 30 years, you've really got to say what does the appointment of him in the first place say about the Labour Party? They will say and do anything to get into power, Ian, and that's really and that's I think that's first of all for me. But I also think that talking about the corruption, the endemic corruption, plays into a narrative that I think is actually quite damaging, because I think there's a type of politics of hysteria that I sense, and in a way, this is why someone like Zach Polanski is gaining ground, particularly with young people, because people, in a way, the more people hear, you know, in a sense, people like you talking about, you know, sort of broken Britain, etc., the more people can say, well, okay, why not give Polanski, why not give a complete newcomer a try? Because if you like it, there's people on the right doing that with reform, saying we forget about the Conservatives. People on the left, obviously, saying, well, let's abandon Labour. And I think it's leading into a kind of trivialisation of politics. But it's interesting that Farage doesn't want to go up against Polanski directly. I don't know if you heard the interview that Layla Cunningham had with Julia this morning, but I mean, obviously this is Reform's candidate for mayor, but it was to me it was a bit of a car crash, and I think what Farage may be worried about is that Reform haven't done enough homework yet.
In what way was it a car? Because it's weird. I'm literally sitting outside the studio while it's on, and I'm looking at the TV screens, and I can see that Layla Cunningham is on, but I didn't hear it. So what happened?
I wondered if someone had put something in Julia's tea, because she went extraordinarily easily on this lady. But I mean, it was really kind of Owen Jones for beginners, really. And I just thought if this lady was any more lightweight, she'd float off like a helium balloon, because it was all, yes, it's all broken. we're going to fix it, but we haven't got any plans. We haven't actually got any, but we can't tell you any costings.
Right. So
And
she wasn't really giving Julia any meat.
Well, no, absolutely, really very little. I think the trouble is, I just think that's really. I think possibly Farage knows that they've got to do a lot more work. Because it's like 2 weeks ago, there's all the fanfare about Jenrick, and it reminded me very much of the SDP. Obviously, you and I probably same sort of time frame, and there was the fanfare about David Owen and Shirley Williams and Bill Rogers leaving the Labour Party and the great future. Of course, it ended up. It was a bit of a farce.
It really was. I wonder. I mean, I've thought about that. I was a kid when that was happening, but I do remember having read a lot about it since. That you're right. There were a few parallels, but I do sense that we might be in different territory now. But you're bang on this, Richard. That there's got to be more meat on the bones. And when he did the press conference yesterday, our own Samara Gill asked him about a comment I think that Jeremy Clarkson had made is, other than stopping the boats, where are the other policies? And he kind of he said, well, watch this space sort of thing. But I think we're in a place now where we need more. Would that be fair?
Yes, and yes. I mean, I think that there's two things. He appears to think that all he needs to do is to kind of it's a bit like he's JR in Dallas, and he just needs to get the faces right, and in a sense everybody will just kind of be impressed by the fact he's got all these really rather attractive faces, but he obviously does need more than that. And you see, what worries me, Ian, Polanski's talking about the legalisation of drugs.
Yeah.
And obviously lots of young people are going to be thinking, well, of course, everybody says broken Britain and the war on drugs has not worked, so why not legalise? Now, of course, that isn't true. And there's a really important point here, Ian, because Peter Hitchens has argued for some years that Blair basically effectively legalised
it. Yeah, he has.
And if you look at what Rupert Lowe has been saying about the rape gangs, they made their money out of two businesses. Ian, it was drugs and also taxis. Now, it occurred to me that if we want to get tough with these rape gangs, we can talk about having an inquiry and sort of naming people, but that isn't really going to, in a way, what's done is done. If we want to really hurt these rape gangs, take away their sources of income, if we actually did enforce the drug laws in places like Manchester and South Yorkshire where they've been doing this, they would lose a source of income because we'll be talking about possession.
Yeah.
And as Peter Hitchens says, the laws are already on the statute book. But if we're not careful, because we're not having a serious conversation, and because sadly Rupert Lowe's not part of Reform, so in a sense they've not really got anybody. Reform haven't got a heavy hitter yet. They've got lots of talkers, but they've got no heavy hitters because they're not talking about serious issues like drugs.
Yep.
The ground is open for Polanski with a simplistic agenda. Let's legalise drugs.
I hear you, and I think that one policy could be the one to put him into that kind of uber-charged Corbyn territory where lots of people suddenly became left-wingers based on things like that. Listen, Richard, I've got to run. Thank you. Great call. Richard down in London. Very briefly, let's do the voice of doom. I'm detecting we have a winner here. It's day 10. It's the mystery voice. This is the voice.
This is your chance.
These are some of the guesses before I get to it. Tim Farron, Rishi Sunak, Ed Vaizey, Boris Johnson, Cecil Parkinson, all no. Oswald Mosley, definitely not. Peter Mandelson, absolutely not. David Blunkett, no. Geoffrey Howe, no. Ted Heath, no. David Laws, no. William Hague, no. And the winner... Oh, we haven't got a winner. It rolls over to tomorrow, day 11. It's back. Stand by for that. I know you can hardly wait. You're ahead of me. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
think that the former Prince Andrew will go to jail over this?
I don't think he'll go to jail over this. I mean, I don't, but you did see the story yesterday that there's a new woman from Florida. A woman, she alleges that she spent the night at Prince Andrew's Royal Lodge in 2010, and she was sent by Jeffrey Epstein, and her attorney's talking. As long as he stays out of the States, I think that they can't force his hand.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCown.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Sinks, and that's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beers, and I feel
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, 0344 499 1000. This one in from Paul in Dorset. Yes is the answer to your question, says Paul. The question was, is the British establishment corrupt? One in from Don in Chelmsford. Very rich men probably feel they are untouchable. Some are almost above the law with their connections. It's actually quite simple if you think about it, how it works. You know, power gravitates to power, and then you sort of convince yourself, even if I don't like them, I need to be with them and near them. They've got a lot of, you know, governments don't do much, really. Governments don't invent or innovate or, you know, specifically build houses. Other people, the private sector does that. So when an old, you know, plutocrat or billionaire comes along, they absolutely love it. Debbie in Cornwall says the one thing that's not getting said is how supermarkets, this is reference pubs and people staying in to watch Netflix rather than going to the pubs. Debbie says the one thing that's not getting said is how supermarkets have not helped the pub trade or the high street. They're allowed to sell alcohol so cheap. Rubbish meat and veg, so closing butchers, greengrocers. They're even allowed to sell clothes, toys, etc. Plus, the ready-made food not good with all the packaging. Bye, says Debbie in Cornwall. It's a fair point as well, although in one of my local supermarkets there's a great butcher's section. Absolutely tip-top stuff. A couple of beautiful sirloins the other day. Straight into the bag. I paid for them, by the way. Let's talk to Philippa in Poole. What's going on, Philippa? What have you got for us? Afternoon.
Afternoon, Ian.
Hello.
How dare you say that Nigel Farage wouldn't win any beauty contests?
Well,
he is very, listen, he is very charming, he's very charismatic, and he is exceedingly handsome. He'd beat Zach Polanski or Dave, as he was formerly known, in any beauty contest, and Dave pales into insignificant comparison.
Wasn't Zelensky called Wayne Smithers or something beforehand?
No, his real name is Dave.
Dave, that's it. I tell you what I did there, because I've always thought when they write about Zach Polanski, a journalist always says, you know, devilishly good looking. And without sounding mean, because I don't want to body shame anybody or anything like that, I've always thought, I don't think Polanski falls into that category at all. So when I made the comment, I thought, if I say Polanski, not exactly a looker, someone's going to contact me and go, well, are you seriously? Neither's Nigel Farage. But you're actually arguing that Mr Farage is right up there with the kind of film star looks department.
I've actually met Nigel in person, and I can tell you, when you look him in the eye, he is very charming, very charismatic, and he is right on the nail with everything he says. And I've spoken to him on talkTV. I asked him what he'd do when he became the Prime Minister, and we had a lovely conversation. So, you know, I think he's got a lot going for him, Nigel. And
well, you're right. I mean, I've known Nigel for many, many years and had lots of drinks and the odd smoke with him as well. I've never wanted to dive in for a kiss, though, I have to say, Philippa.
Well, I might do if I get the opportunity.
There you go. We've got a proper Nigel Farage fan there. Maybe you could be on his campaign trail. Or maybe that's the last thing he needs, Philippa.
Oh, believe you me, I don't know whether he could handle me, but there you go.
Well, what a thought to finish on. Philippa, thank you very much indeed for that. Cliff says, Rory is in many ways correct. Rory was the guest, the publican and the writer that we spoke to earlier about this dilemma that pubs face when people are staying in to watch Netflix. He says Rory is right in many ways about the demise of pubs. I would also add to this greedy pub companies who effectively have removed from publicans who are tenants the perk of the pub kitchen. Supermarkets destroyed individual specialist shops such as greengrocers, butchers and fishmongers, and now they're killing the pub. I don't like out-of-control kids in pubs either. Yeah, you do have to kind of watch for that, don't you? I mean, you get pubs that are obviously family pubs. They're usually quite large. They've got a garden where the kids can play, you know, ball and stuff. I don't like taking my own kids into pubs in case, you know, one of them has a mardy moment. And then you think, oh, great, I'm going to be that parent. I'm going to be that parent. They've never lost it on an aeroplane yet, which is my bigger nightmare, because we've all been on a plane when some kid kicks off. And you sometimes feel sorry for my other half went up to a passenger who was struggling with this baby that was screaming like a flipping banshee, this thing. And my other half went up to the woman and punched her. No, she didn't. She went up to her and said, "Are you okay? Can I help you?" And the woman was almost in tears because she obviously thought I'm being a pest and people are annoyed with me. And here's this lovely lady who's come to help me, which I disagree with, frankly. I'd have chucked the woman off the aeroplane with the baby. That's another story. And one in from Becca, who says, I think to get this country back to transparency, all super injunctions should be stopped. It's not fair. The rich and the elite should hide behind the courts, says Becca. I don't think there's as many as there used to be, but you don't just get them. Well, having said that, I'm pretty sure some people would say, if you know the right people, you do. There was that whole era of the super injunctions. You remember? You couldn't even say someone had the super injunction without breaking the super injunction. And there were loads of people speculating. I could give you 6 people that had super injunctions, probably still do, that I would be in trouble if I named them. If I mention their name now, I could be called into court for breaching the super injunction just by saying that they had one. So there you go. That's how strict it technically is. There was a whole era when, like, everyone was speculating. Is it him? Is it her? Mostly him, actually. Maybe there were a few women on there. Sometimes there can be a good reason for a super injunction, a valid reason. But often, certainly on some of the stories I've been familiar with, which are usually double, triple and quadruply sourced, there were some people who got them because they were just dirty old goats, frankly, and didn't want to get rumbled. 0344 499 1000. Back with more from you coming next on Talk.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Lots to get through. 25 to 4 already. Goodness me. Rent controls are coming to the UK, but they're not guaranteed. Not a guaranteed win for tenants. We often hear about rent controls. I mean, on the face of it, somebody says, well, controlling rent, and you look at some of the rents around the UK, you think, well, this is, they're ridiculous. When I think about what, a rent is more than a mortgage, so that to many people seems a bit weird. But when you look at the disproportionate rise in rents, there's an absolute issue there. You've now got people bidding for houses, and God knows what percentage of people's wages are now going towards rent. I mean, it's a ludicrous amount of money. Let's speak to Nye Jones, Head of Campaigns for Generation Rent. Nye, good afternoon to you.
Hi Ian, thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. Now, I kind of get the notion, I just don't know how you fairly implement a rent control. What do you think?
I mean, it's really good to hear that you kind of understand the need for actions on our rents, and you put it into context quite well, but I'll add a bit more context that if since 1988, if the cost of bananas has risen at the same speed as private rents, a bunch would now cost nearly £13 in the supermarket. And we do actually have statistics about how much renters are spending on their rent. Yeah. So nationally, it's an average of 36% of income. But in cities like London, Bristol and Edinburgh, it's well over 40%.
Yeah. Have you ever bought a banana in Waitrose, no?
I tend to go to Aldi or Lidl as I'm a private renter and all my money gets spent on rent. So,
listen, no, it does. And I work with a lot of younger people and they tell the same story. But of course, it's had a mixed history, hasn't it? Rent controls. We've had them they've been around for thousands of years, literally thousands of years. We had them, I think, after the First World War in this country. Again, there seemed to be a necessity for it then. Could we realistically do it now? We're not North Korea. Why should we be stopping people charging whatever they want and people paying whatever they can?
Yeah, I think it's important to make clear what we're talking about in context of the UK. We aren't talking about a freeze on rents or reducing rents. In terms of what's being brought in Scotland, we're talking about a cap, similar to like the energy price cap, on how much landlords can raise the rent. And that's tagged to inflation plus 1%. So it still leaves room for landlords to raise the rent in line with rising costs. But what it prevents them from doing is issuing sudden, really high, unaffordable rent hikes that either leave renters spending huge swathes of their money on rent or force them to leave the home and become priced out of their communities.
It does differ, of course, from place to place. You mentioned the cost of rents. I think down in London, it's about £2,200 a month is the average rent. I mean, these are sky-high figures. There will be a lot of landlords that say, yeah, and my mortgage is £2,000 a month. So do one, Nye.
I mean, what I would say back to them is I would question the idea that landlords will be kind of forced out the market by limits on rent increases. As I said, it still gives scope for rents to be raised. Also, HMRC records show that just 42% of landlords declare mortgage interest on their tax return. So this means around 58% don't have any borrowing on the homes they own. And the latest English private landlord survey showed in the main, landlords raise the rent because they can charge more, because the rental market allows them, not because they have a financial need to. And if a landlord does decide to sell their home because, say, rent controls are brought in, that home isn't bulldozed to the ground. It could be bought by someone who actually wants to live in it, or it could be bought by another landlord. And landlords can also sell with tenants in situ to minimise disruptions to people's lives.
Do you just hate landlords, Nye?
No, we don't hate landlords, but we think that there is a power imbalance between tenants and landlords that's caused huge social problems. I've talked about people being priced out of communities. If you think about the average time a family spends in temporary accommodation now is more than 5 years. And that's because they simply can't find somewhere to rent that's affordable. And the mass loss of social homes has created this huge demand for private rents, and we need to better regulate private renting to make it fairer for renters.
Where has this worked brilliantly? Because I remember in the sort of 2020s, Berlin tried this and it fell through the flipping floor, didn't it? Because the amount of availability of property just diminished.
I mean, what Berlin tried was different. That was a rent freeze. So there was no scope for landlords to raise the rent. What we're talking about here is quite different. This is a limit on rent increases. So it will allow landlords to raise the rent with rising costs, with inflationary measures. It will stop the really soaring rents that we've seen in recent years that have caused huge social problems. And I mean, what we're asking for isn't radical or utopian. We just want renters to be able to live in good quality homes that don't force them to make impossible choices like heating or eating each month. I mean, in 2026, I don't think that's too much to ask.
There are, of course, there's landlords and then there's landlords, and I'm not talking here about, you know, some kind of Russian plutocrat who owns 5,000 homes around the UK, and I believe those examples are actually quite real. But the average person might have inherited a house or something like that. There are some of those landlords that, because of other rules and regulations which they sense are either too bureaucratic or just actually not even fair on the landlord, it is possible for the landlord to be dealt a blow sometimes. Some of those guys are selling up. Now, if too many of them sell up, you reduce the stock, and then, of course, well, in theory, the rent goes up. So is it a case of being careful what you wish for here?
I mean, as I've said, if a landlord does decide to sell a home, that home doesn't disappear. Often it will be bought by a first-time buyer or another landlord who's willing to rent it out. So, I mean, I've seen this argument framed often by landlord groups that controls on our rents are bad for renters, and I would reject that. I think what rent caps would give us would be a sense of stability and security, knowing that the home we're living in can't suddenly be priced out of our reach on a whim.
Is there another alternative lurking around? I mean, over there at Generation Rent, I mean, I'm sure over a swift beer or two, you must have sort of crunched the numbers and had a look at, you know, even other alternatives. Is there another way of doing it? I've long thought that there must be more intelligent ways of building housing, and certainly quicker ways of building housing. But nobody's thus far has actually listened to me on that. Are there any other theories of getting people into affordable housing?
I mean, the big other strand and the big cause, one of the major causes of the high rents we see now is the loss of social homes and the huge mass selling off through policies like Right to Buy and councils being unable for whatever reason to build new social homes. So a major tenet of that is what the government is doing to an extent is creating more genuinely affordable homes that will take pressure off the rental market. But even with all the will in the world, that will take time, and renters are really, really struggling now. As you know, someone who's been renting in London for the past decade, I've seen more and more of my income swallowed up by my landlord. And it, you know, leads to a sense of hopelessness, a sense that the system is against you, and kind of a bleak outlook for the future. So it needs to be a combination of measures. Yeah. But I think limits to rent increases have to be central to that.
You could move, Nye, couldn't you? You could go live somewhere where it's cheaper.
I mean, I'm born and bred from North London. I've always lived in London. I don't think it's too much to ask for someone to be able to live in the community they grew up in, and rather than having to go elsewhere because I can't afford it.
There's lots of nice. Cleveland's quite nice, and the rents are about a quarter of London.
But this is my home. This is where my family is. This is where my friends are.
You'll make new friends, right?
A home is
you
the
against
foundation
making
of your
new
life.
friends?
People should have the choice to put down the roots where they want to and where it makes them happiest. And I'm happiest in London. I just wish my rent was a bit cheaper.
Yeah, no, I'm joshing here, of course, but I do wonder whether the overarching argument in this country will always be, look, we're not North Korea. We don't have people telling other people what they can charge or what they should pay. It's not how we roll. It's full of bear traps and pitfalls. So notionally, it sounds very kind, and Polanski-loving lefties will be cheering and popping the champagne, but everyone else will be going, no, this is state intervention, it's a step too far.
I mean, I think we have to consider that we're talking about homes here. We're not talking about choices. We're not talking about, you know, what type of mayonnaise you buy in the supermarket, for example. We're talking about something that everybody needs, a foundation of our lives. And we're talking about putting a slight limit on how much can be charged after costs have soared in recent years. I don't think that that's akin to North Korea or something like that. It's just about making renters' lives slightly better and more secure.
Good work. Nye, great to have you with us. Thank you. Nye Jones, Head of Campaigns for Generation Rent. Look, it's a double-edged sword. Everybody is aware of it. I do know from talking to God knows how many landlords, and yes, if you've got no mortgage on your house and you haven't had a mortgage for 25 years because you've owned it for that long, and maybe you own two and you're charging £2,000 a month rent, so between the two you're making 48 grand a year and you don't even have to get out of bed. Look, no one's going to shed any tears if somebody says, sorry mate, your 48 grand a year is going to go down to 40 grand a year because we've got some rent controls. I know that's quite a seductive sell, but I would argue that is not a very typical case of a landlord, and there are lots of landlords who are renting out homes that are just covering the cost of their mortgage. And when mortgages were going absolutely bananas, just to bring bananas back into it, those landlords were taking a hit, and some were working at a loss to rent out their homes. And it is skew. The cost of a house to buy is just gone, I was about to say bananas again. We can't get away from the flipping bananas. It really has. I was talking to somebody last night about, you know that argument or the anecdotes rather that everybody tells about, oh, you know, when I bought my first house it cost this, if only I'd hung on to it and rented it out today it would be worth this amount of money. You can play that game all day long, and on a bad day it will drive you quite literally mad. You can't do that, but there are clearly questions about the cost of, you know, when they talk about, well, there's a crisis, there's a housing crisis, the cost of a house, it's gone down by, the average house has gone down by £2,000, and you think, yeah, but it's gone up by 102,000 in the last 6 years. I mean, really? Everybody's done all right out of it, mostly. Thoughts on that? Michael's in Birmingham. Back to Netflix and pubs, Michael. What are you thinking? Hi.
Yeah, I just think that sadly we're in just a change in society. Really, I don't think pubs are ever going to be what they used to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're closing down. I mean, for me, I personally, I've got no interest in drinking at home. You know, I'm not a particularly virtuous sort of guy.
Yep.
But for me, having a drink is a social event. You know,
Okay.
I'd rather go out and be out and about, even if it's cheaper to get a six-pack, you know,
Sure.
and all that sort of thing. But when I do go out, I mean, like on Monday night, I was stood up in Broad Street, literally stood up in Broad Street in Birmingham, and it was a dismal sight. You know.
So you went on a date?
Well, I mean, people of my age, do we date? Well,
I wasn't criticising it. When you said you were stood up, you said literally stood up.
Yeah, literally stood up, yeah.
So you're meant to meet someone and you end up on your Todd?
Yeah, down Spoons. But it's all right, we've rearranged it for tomorrow where she'll be stood up.
She won't,
so,
So you're not going to turn up. But did you still go in the Spoons and have a few drinks?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was absolutely freezing cold, I mean, the Spoons was right opposite. I mean, she'd have gone to Brindley Place if she'd have played her cards right. As it was, I ended up in the Spoons, me and some guy called Doug who had slippers on. So you know.
So Doug was a random you just bumped into?
The other way round.
Right, okay. So slipper-based Doug and you had a few jars together.
Well, 1.5 before I got out of there. But I just think, you know, I mean, even when I go on Saturday nights, which is rare, the Saturday night crowd's like a Monday night crowd these days. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when there was loads more drinkers. They were always packed out the door.
Yep.
And I've spoken to my daughters about this, and they say, well, us younger folk, we don't really want to drink that much like you older folk used to.
Yeah, there is. Like, I think, you know, I think there's generational things. I think the kind of current social generation, as in sort of 18 to 30s, I think they do a lot more than they do drinking.
So do I. I mean, to give you an idea of what it was like when I was in that age group, I didn't bother with any of that stuff, but... The good thing is that you can catch up on TV now, because I went between 18 and 30 and I hardly saw any TV. I was out seven nights a week.
Yeah.
For about 15 years. You know, and not necessarily always on the bevy.
Yeah.
But, you know. But anyway, I just think it's a change. It's sad, and I think in a few years' time, you know.
It is, and amazing that, you know, you get the odd pub that's always crammed and rammed and all the rest of it. And I know pubs often say, you know, people go, they're always busy. No, they're busy on a Saturday, busy on a Sunday when they do the Sunday lunches, but you can't actually survive just on 2 days, because it probably just pays for the rest of the week. Michael, thank you very much indeed. I've been into pubs, even local pubs, where you sit there. There might be you and a mate. It happened a couple of months ago. We had a bite to eat in a pub, a couple of drinks. There was a table over there. They had a bite to eat. We just looked at it and thought, well, us being in here could not have possibly paid for them to be open tonight. It can't have done. There were like 3-4 members of staff. Their electricity bill, they've got to cook. There's a bloke in the kitchen cooking. There's no way it covered their wages. So they were working at a loss. And then, of course, they hope they make their money up at the weekends and stuff. So maybe it has changed for good. But is there another way? I don't know. Community pubs, by which I mean the community own the pub. You can only imagine that ending in tears and violence, can't you? In a big way. 0344 499 1000, 10 to 4. This is Talk.
But of course, once again, this explodes all of his notions that he said to Emily Maitlis about being an honourable gentleman and trying to break things off with Epstein. We can see quite clearly he was lying through his teeth. He has maintained that relationship. And also now, of course, as wasn't the case before, his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, absolutely in the mire as well, with these fawning emails saying she wants to marry Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, marry, at one point, marry me. I mean, and this was after his conviction.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This one from Dave in Kent. This is reference reform. Again, this idea that reform needs to push out loads of policies 3 years from an election is for the birds. They don't get to stand up in the Commons and question the government. Well, they do. As the leading party in the polls, maybe the system needs to change. Labour said nothing and didn't have any policies going into government, even after being in opposition for 14 years. Also, you cannot put in policies when you don't know what the state of UK finances will be in 2029. That is I think that's true and not true. Labour did have some policies because they had a manifesto, but you're quite right, Dave, that when you're in opposition, whether you're the official opposition or one of the other opposition parties, you have a kind of luxury that you really don't have to put all the meat on the bone. But I think with reform, because there is a different kind of spotlight on them, maybe we'll see some of that thrashed out quicker than, as Dave correctly said, quicker than you might do with a larger party. Dave's in Luton. Dave, what have you got for us? We've not got long, but I know you can do it. Fire away. Corruption.
Hi, Ian, how you doing? Yeah, corruption. I was going to say to you, I think it's gotten so far and so deep now with corruption in our establishment that people have just become blasé about it.
Yeah.
But you can go back as far as Paddy Pantsdown and his shenanigans. You could talk about the current king and how he cheated on his wife and how he used to be best friends with Jimmy Savile. Nicola Sturgeon and her theft up in Scotland, and Tony Blair and his shenanigans.
I have to say, just for legal reasons, I don't think Nicola Sturgeon has stolen or thieved anything, but I know what you're saying.
A lovely motorhome appeared on her drive miraculously.
Well, there is still, I think, a legal... I think it was her mother's home, wasn't it? I think there's still some legal ramifications around that. But I take your point. But we condemn people, don't we? Sometimes because of people they just happen to know. Like Jimmy Savile. Everybody knew Jimmy Savile, right? Everybody got photographed with Jimmy Savile. Blair, Thatcher, the King, you name it. Everybody was there.
That's exactly my point. Look how deep the corruption went with Jimmy Savile. Look how deep these people's terrible judgment was.
But they didn't all know. That was the problem.
How can they have not known? There was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of victims. They must have known them. All of those people that you just mentioned have got security staff. MI5 are watching their back, special branch. Somebody must have...
Do you know what? I've spoken... This is absolutely true. I've spoken to producers that worked with Savile, and they thought he was a bit of a party animal and liked the girls. But had no real idea that he was any of the things. I think the problem with Savile, there were so many urban myths about him, so many stories about him, that you had to believe that they were not believable. I remember being at school, for God's sake, Dave, hearing stories of Jimmy Savile. Listen, I've got to move, Dave. Dave in Luton. This is Kev in London.
You went to school?
I know.
God, doesn't show.
Kev, it was only for half an hour. Give me a break.
Of course, what did they say about Jimmy Savile? He was the man who groomed the nation. I think your caller there, is being a little unfair. That said, I don't think Margaret Thatcher or King Charles had the faintest idea what he was up to. A lot of us on Fleet Street did, but they didn't.
But it was always, when there's a story but there's not a story, there's not quite enough to hang it on.
Look, I've been on several papers, been very close to exposing Jimmy Savile for all
But for lots of legal reasons, it never quite happened.
He would always slap you with a massive illegal letter warning you off, lawyers, and involving all of his great work for charity. Beware of men who devote their lives to charity, and indeed women. It's usually to cover things up.
Yeah, exactly. We say that. Apologies to Dr. Bernardo if you're listening. You're a fine man.
No, he's the worst. No, that's a joke, folks. Isabel Oakeshott will be in a minute to discuss the latest extraordinary developments on the Mandelson story. I think that Starmer is facing a rebellion of his own MPs, because this clause that they put in, the Badenoch and the Tories have quite rightly said, we need to know everything about the vetting process that led you to appoint this man as our ambassador to Washington. We need to know everything. They said, oh yes, that will be fine. And the actual amendment says, unless these documents are a matter of national security.
Which is BS.
And a lot of Labour MPs are saying, no, this will be marked.
But here's the thing, Kev, they must have... The point is, the question that is really being asked here is, did Keir Starmer know that Mandelson was mates with Epstein after Epstein had gone to jail? That's the chronology.
Well, he did say that when he appointed him, and that was the key moment.